Here we go.
Yep, got you there.
All right, beautiful. All right. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for joining us today and tonight. It's nighttime here in Perth, Western Australia, where we're both from here, Drew. You might notice that it says free on the screen. That's because when Drew signed up, same thing as Mr. Bombastic, he's got me. When spell check kicks in and they press save, there is no way of changing their name. So they're going to obviously have to contact Fireside.
The name is actually free, isn't it?
That's right, absolutely. So, all right. So, first things first, ladies and gentlemen, what I want you to do is to hit that share with Firesiders button. Okay, so share with the people that are following you and you're following, so that way we can get this show out there, get some interaction with the audience. Next thing I just want to let you know is that where the fortune cookie is, if you're listening here live on Fireside, is a link to my Instagram. If you want to leave a message during this show, feel free to do so, and I will leave a voicemail on my Instagram and I'll play that during the show so you can be heard. If you have any questions for Drew, as we get into his story, I think that's kind of setting the path for the podcast to go. I think we're going to be here for a little while. We've got a few hours up our sleeve, but Drew, thanks for joining us, man. What a pleasure.
More than welcome. It's been nice to meet you, and look forward to getting stuck into the show and chatting to you and your audience. So thanks for jumping in, audience, and again, look forward to unraveling this story.
Absolutely, man. So we titled this show, of course, Life of a Aussie Gangster, Ex-bikie, and that's what you are. But one part that we've kind of left out is that there's a whole other part to you since this life that you've had in the past with a much more positive spin. So before we go into the gangster side of things, a little bit about your life. I do just want to just start the note off on a positive note and just kind of let the folks know that Drew is releasing his own podcast called Man to Man, I believe real soon. Is that right?
Yeah, end of this Man to Man, let's talk about it, the podcast series, yep.
Okay, and so I missed the date because the sound was cutting off then. When was that coming out?
Yeah, sorry, end of this month, mate, is the aim.
Real soon. Okay, perfect. And you've got a couple of books that have been released shortly as well, so we'll get into all that. But to start, Drew, if you don't mind taking me back a little bit, I want to sort of with my podcast go into now. I'll let the folks know. I've probably met nobody online here through this whole podcast world since I've started, but I've been fortunate enough to meet two of my guests, and one of them being Drew just the other day. One of the other ones being scientist Raymond Palmer. And so we just sat down and had a quick lunch. Although I haven't gone into his life, I said, don't tell me, I don't want to know. That's not my style. My style is to actually speak to someone for the first time, actually getting these stories out of people and understanding who they are and where they're from. Pretty much everything that I know I've said already, so I haven't known too much. And so we're going to do a bit of a deep dive with Drew now. And if you don't mind, listen, Drew, if there's anything that you don't want to put on the table, you don't have to. If there's any path you want to cross that you can't from your past, you don't have to. You can skip over it. You can say we don't have to, or you want to leave names out or anything like that. That's totally fine, because Drew does come from a gangster background, folks. He comes from what we call over here in Australia bikies. You'll call them bikers over in America. But first of all, tell us a little bit about where you were born, what life was like for you as a kid.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for the acknowledgement that, first of all, I've turned my life around, because you said that's what I am. It's what I was and no longer am. So I appreciate that acknowledgement, first of all, and obviously very passionate about what I'm currently doing. As you can see, guys, the banner in the background, I'm a coach and mentor, and I'm using my journey now to give back and create positive change and give back the things that I took away through the podcast series, my coaching and mentoring, the book releases, and some other really exciting things that I'm involved in. So, yeah, there is a positive spin, but, it's all off the back of using this journey that I got involved in and using it for my own good, rather than thinking that, making me a worse person or a more bad person. It's I've used that for good. So, look, if we go back, born in a small mining town to some beautiful parents that unfortunately weren't meant to be together. I was about 7 when they broke up. That had a bit of an impact to start off with, and then as we progressed, Mum unfortunately looked for love in all the wrong places and came across some pretty broken and violent men. The culmination of was one particular gentleman who was probably not so much a gentleman, but unfortunately from his own brokenness, was a violent alcoholic man. And I watched and listened on as Mum was beaten and raped and all these other things during that time. I was about 11 when the culmination was I watched him storm out of the house, and I was watching through my back window because we're in a small state West housing house by that time, and we didn't have a lot of money. So we could hear everything that was going on, and he stormed through the house, and I heard him do that, and I watched as he went into the garden shed and got a rope and scaled the wood yard and hung himself. So he tied himself up to a branch and then tied it around his neck and then stepped off. So I've screamed through the house, yelling to Mum, he's done it, he's done it. I've gone and grabbed the knife and the bluntest knife in the kitchen, by the way, and hacked this rope. And we dropped him down and were able to save his life. So that had a profound impact on me, not being able to save my mum as an 11-year-old boy.
Well, let's just stop right there, man. That's like so loaded, that first little bit straight away, man. I just want to slow that down for a second and ask you. So your parents split when you were about 7. That's right. And you had some other siblings as well?
Yeah, younger brother and older sister during that time. Yep.
Okay. And so when your parents split, you went off with your mother then. Did you get to spend much time with your father in that next coming years as well?
No, look, for the first few months, obviously there was a settling in period. And then from there on after, it was every second weekend that we were able to stay with Dad and interact with Dad. But unfortunately, if I went, and I have looked back at this a lot, there probably wasn't the father figure role model that I certainly needed at that time. And I mean, every second weekend, we loved seeing Dad, and Mum never stopped us seeing Dad. But yeah, there just wasn't that constant male role model figure there for us during that time. So that was obviously definitely a massive impact.
All right. So so just moving slowly through that again, is that your mum was going with all the wrong guys at the time. So she was probably potentially like looking for love, looking for what she needed, but was just getting it from the wrong attention, wrong sort of dudes. So this guy that you were specifically talking about that went to hang himself, was he like a longer term relationship for your mum, a long-term relationship?
Yeah, he was, surprisingly, and they even stayed together for a number of years after that incident. So yeah, it was one of the longer term partnerships that she was involved in. Yeah.
But yeah, he was one of the more violent ones you remember?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, by far and away. Yeah.
So so this was 11 when you saw he went to hang himself from the tree. How long was he with your mother before that and also after? I'm just trying to get a timestamp of how long he was in your life at that young age.
12 or 18 months prior to, and then another 4 or 5 years thereafter. They were married and spent a prolonged period of time together. So yeah.
All right. And so yeah, I can straight away notice that he's like this profound effect on your life just that, I'll say right age, wrong age, just at that age, that ripe age where your brain's still trying to understand what's going on. It hasn't got as much logic and reason with it to break down a situation. And there's probably a lot of mixed understanding emotions that are going on. And you're looking for that father or that male role model figure, right? And he's kind of the guy that's around the most.
Absolutely. And, I've looked back, I've reflected back, I've broken this all down. Obviously, I had to get where I am, right? And we can go into that more later. But in essence, this man, we feared this man, right? He's a shearer, he's an alcoholic, he's violent, he doesn't have that loving tendency. Yet here we are as kids trying to cling to him as a male role model and somewhat a father figure. And I remember one night, we're having a pillow fight. We were supposed to be in bed. It wasn't that late. But he's come in with a kettle cord folded in half, drunk, and we were severely beaten with this kettle cord folded in half for having a pillow fight. So again, this is the confusion, but it was nothing more than fear, and the result of that was later on down the track this feeling of not being able to save mum, number one, from him, but two, this complete and utter disrespect, disdain, distrust for men in general. So that did have, again, that's that profound impact at that young age, trying to make sense of the world. And as a young boy, he will hear all these traumatic events layer on layer. And yeah, looking back, it certainly did have a profound effect. Yeah.
So I'm just curious, and it's hard for fathers sometimes in split marriages to step in and intervene, do things, even with their own kids. But I'm just wondering, your dad's only sort of got access once every couple of weeks. Was he aware of what was going on with your mother or with you kids from this guy, and what was his understanding of it and sort of effect?
Yeah, definitely. Dad was aware, and back in that day, we're talking about sort of the 80s sort of period in my growing up time, and the courts were very, I guess, lenient and preferred the kids to be with mum. So Dad did look into a number of avenues, but it was, in his words, were it was never going to happen. So unfortunately, it was just something that we all had to manage our way through.
Okay. So going back now to that time where you saw him go and hang himself from a tree, that's pretty traumatic for a kid to see, man. You said you rushed off, grabbed a knife from the kitchen to help cut him down, but that was the bluntest knife in the kitchen. Obviously, you had trouble cutting him down. What were your initial feelings when you were seeing this? Shock, fear, wanting to save him, not wanting to save him? Did all that sort of cross your mind?
No, total autopilot at that point in time. It was the rush to save his life, even regardless of what he was putting us through. There was just not even a second thought as to saving his life, and that was just actions I took, and shock and adrenaline, all these things take over. And for me, there was no question that I was going to do all I could to save his life. So yeah.
Sure. Okay. So carry on from the age of 11 as things start going on for you now in your childhood, at school, with peers. Run me through that sort of scenario.
Yeah, look, I never found I really fitted in anyway. I've always known I was different. And I'm not sure what impact the family situation. Obviously, it was very unsettling, and concentration at school was difficult. Even though a lot of my reports said I showed enormous potential, but just failed to apply it. Now, whether that was the undercurrent from all the background unsettlement that we'd gone through, it's arguable. I did feel obviously that it probably had some form of impact, but socially not really fitting in. So I was always sort of kicking my own general path through school, and it wasn't till sort of later when I got into my high school years, and mum moved on from that guy, and still in the same town, that I started to rely more on my social circle and wanting to, I guess, be accepted. And that sort of took me on, that was the beginnings of my juvenile sort of crime days, where I started to veer off and break the law from a young age and becoming involved in drinking and using pot and these other kinds of things at a fairly young age. So yeah, that progression was already there from a fairly young age.
So just in hindsight, looking back a little bit, do you think that kind of the lack of structure at home at this point in time when you were younger, and then looking for the acceptance in friends, and maybe not the best friends at that, just led you down a juvenile track?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, look, I was
juvenile crime, I should say. Yeah.
13, 14 years old, out and about looking for mischief. And yeah, look, mum, she had all the love in the world for us, and she
Sure.
did what she possibly could. And one thing we did get from mum is a lot of love, and that's where I get a lot of my heart from. But look, it did. We were always on the move too. Every year we were moving house to house, so that was obviously contributed to the unsettlement. And just could never find my feet at school. Just always feeling different to other people and not fitting in. So it was always a bit of a struggle for me. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me a bit more about taking that bad track as a kid. Like, what did looking back again, what path did you take that started getting you into trouble, and what influences did you have, and how did that grow into a criminal life?
Look, I didn't really have any influences, and this was half my trouble. From an early age, I was kicking my own goals. I was my own motivation, and I was a very motivated young kid. I remember getting my first set of weights, at about 9 or 10 years old. I was training in the mornings, and this is all off my own steam. So yeah, I became really motivated, and one of the catalysts for me as a young guy, I was always a bit smaller kid at school. I got picked on and bullied a fair bit as well. And one story was I went to a local park, to see one of my mates have a fight with one of the older guys, and we watched the fight, and my mate won, and I was spruiking a bit, and one of his mates approached me and said, "Well, why don't you shut your mouth?" And I said, "Well, why don't you do it for me?" So we did.
You could swear on this podcast. It's not a problem, man. Yeah.
I've trained myself out of swearing, so it actually comes back.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so he smashed me in the face, and my face blew up, and I've gone home to the same guy that we're referencing with this fat head and fat eye, and he's, "Well, boy, what did you do for yourself? What did you do about it?" And I was like, "Well, I couldn't do anything about it." "Well, what do you want to do?" I can't do anything. So anyway, his solution puts me in the car, takes me down to the local boxing gym. I poke my head in. He pokes his head in. He's walking to the coach, and I'm standing there looking, and there's all in Australia. I'm not sure how it is in the US or wherever else is, but boxing's a very popular sport for the local Indigenous guys, and they're really talented. And there wasn't one white guy in there. I'm not racist. I grew up with Aboriginal guys. I've got friends of all multi-colours. Our souls don't see colour. I have one love for everybody. But when I talk about it in the context of this conversation, please, it's not from a racist perspective. So I see all these talented Aboriginal guys, these local Indigenous guys in there, and I was scared, right? I was really scared. And my stepdad has gone up to the coach and said, "Look, my son, he's been hit. I want you to teach him to box." So he's taken me under his wing, and lo and behold, with the physical interaction I already had, I was looking after myself physically. I took to boxing like a duck to water, and I became very good very quickly, and began sparring those guys, in the gym that were always better than me. I caught up to them very quickly, and I was fighting in the ring at age 11. So here I was, a disillusioned kid, a disrespected kid, a kid trying to find acceptance. And how did I find acceptance all of a sudden? Through this, right? I learned to box, and if I was picked on at school, they would organise fights for me. I would go to those fights, and I would win those fights. And the outcome of that was, all of a sudden I was starting to see the respect and feel the respect. And I thought, hang on a minute, this is actually getting me somewhere. So all of a sudden I had this anger from my stepdad and not being able to save mum. And here I was being at school and on the street, winning the respect that I always struggled to get. So for me, boxing became my outlet. It was the outlet for my projected anger, but it was also something that I gained social acceptance from. So it became one of the tools in my toolkit from the age of 11, having my first fight in the ring. I had no family, no friends there. I went from my small country town to the big city to fight. In this, first fight was in the state novice titles, and I won that fight. And again, just boxing fed something for me, and I boxed for many years after, and I do blame boxing for a fair bit of the trouble.
Well, would it be fair to say this? Not so much the boxing. In one way, it might have saved you too, right? So you may have been kind of in a way destined down a track, but the boxing is a great mechanism for self-defense as well. Now, you said respect that you were getting, but also it must have been a sense of empowerment from feeling powerless to what was happening with your mother, to a sense of power as well, right? Like power, respect as well. That would have just been motivation to keep going. Like, what the fuck's going to stop you, man? Because you're a kid, you're getting this feeling that you've been searching for, it's happening, and you just be knocking dudes out left, right, and center.
Oh, and that's the thing, right? I now know, looking back, it wasn't respect, it was fear, number one, which is two completely contrasting judgments of a person. Fear is a kind of respect, but yeah, it wasn't genuine respect, number one. But yeah, absolutely. Here I was, fearing men. I didn't like men, and I didn't used to fight men that were weak. Being not the biggest guy back then, I used to find big guys who thought they were better than me, or who wanted to pick on me. and call them out and beat them up. And my distrust of men, my not liking men, watching what that man did to my mum, was just that avenue for me to project those emotions and start to gain some of what I thought was control over my life. And the outcome was not generally positive, but it was in my mind as a young kid. It was it was filling that void in my life for sure.
Take us down that track that wasn't so positive. Let us know some of those next steps that were happening after you were fighting a lot at school. What happened with your schooling? Did it end okay? Did you get into any serious trouble?
Look, interestingly, Mum fought for me to be focused in my school, so I actually went back and repeated Year 10. I'd speed off the track, got myself into a heap of trouble, failed Year 10 at Disney, and Mum won a raffle ticket for a light aircraft flight at the local aerodrome, and she gave that ticket to me, and I went flying and just loved flying, loved being up there in the air, and I said, that's what I want to do. So Mum made the investment, swapped my school. I repeated Year 10, did really well through Year 10 and Year 11, really focused, really driven. And I know that instability, it fell apart when, my drinking and, sort of the pot use and my anger. I just was always fueled with anger. And, coming from a different school, I was always fighting, not accepted at the next school. So there was always that undertone there. I was always struggling against it, even though I repeated Year 10, I had this grand vision. Ended up leaving school at Year 12, knowing that I wasn't going on to university. Again, there was all this undertone of volatility with me, and I progressed through Year 12, left Year 12, and started this dead-end job as a landscape labourer. And within a few months, I realised I was going nowhere, going out every weekend, just drinking too much, getting written off and fighting. So I was in a dead end, and I was looking for a way out. And I actually saw an advertisement for the Australian Army, and I thought that might be my way out. As a fit guy, I was able to box, and I was playing footy. I was a talented footy player. Got invited to play for a Perth team, and that opportunity came and went. But I ended up joining the Army. I became a highly trained recon sniper. I did.
How old were you when you joined the Army?
I was young, 17. I joined as young as I possibly could.
Wow.
As a 17-year-old boy, I was.
And straight into trying to be a sniper. So you go through infantry first. Obviously, I was in the military as well, and then you apply after that to be a sniper. And that's no easy gig, man. So for a young fella too, that's someone who's pretty determined if they're going to accept something like that.
Yeah, it's funny. My mates, when I told my mates, I was actually at one of my birthday parties, and I had a group of mates around. At this time, I had long hair down to my shoulders, surfy sort of guy, and we were sitting around drinking. And I said, "Well, boys, I've got some news for you. I'm going to the Army," and they all burst out laughing. Right, just you're dreaming. You'd be kicked out in 2 weeks, right? So I went. I had a plan, right? I went in and grabbed a set of clippers, and I walked out, and they all knew you don't touch my hair. I had this thing about people touching my hair and touching my head, right? Weirdo, but so I've gone in and grabbed the clippers, and when I started shaving my head, their jaws hit the ground, and they knew I was serious. Within a month, I was gone. Joined the infantry, was trained up, and got to my battalion, and I really took to it. I took to the structure. I took to the physical challenge. Still, I was angry, but the Army and the infantry, if you know anything about the infantry, they actually encourage that anger out of you. They want you to be angry. It's attack. And the physical challenges and all that came with that. I really warmed to that. I really lent into that and achieved a lot. I got best shot in Kapuka. I got best physical training at the infantry training school. Progressed on to my battalion. Won all the awards. I got top 10 in mil skills out of about 600 soldiers in the first month or two that I arrived for my battalion. Was selected in all of the physical challenge, all the obstacle course teams, and got onto the dog squad, which is the best seven soldiers in the battalion go away, get sent away to compete. So I achieved a lot. I got myself onto the recon course, then onto the sniper course, and within 12 months, 18 months, I ruffled a lot of feathers by getting promoted into the recon sniper platoon in a very quick time. So effectively, I was on a mission. Had hopes and dreams to go to the SAS, and they were dashed by us getting called over to East Timor, and sort of came back even in a worse state, really more anxious, more I was more angry when I returned. And
after that, okay, let's hold it there. I want to go into that a little bit. I want to elaborate a little bit on your training, but we do have a message here from Elvis. So let me just play that real quick. Here we go. Let's see what Elvis has to say.
Hey guys, what's going on? Great show so far, man. I'm really enjoying it. I had a question about that. I know you didn't like men, you said. Did you have any anger or resentment towards your father? Because you mentioned that he sort of knew what was going on at the other house. And did that anger, did you use that as a motivator, for the good and the bad things that came in your life after this? I'm just curious. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Elvis.
Yeah, interesting question because, as a kid, as a boy, and for me, I was always looking and clinging to that father figure, that role model. So I never resented Dad. I didn't. He's actually a really stable, really successful guy. So for us, it was a positive interaction and just to be able to see him. So no, looking back, I never punished him. I think later on down the track when he tried to influence me, when I started to really spear off the tracks, that was when I really rejected him fathering me because he probably didn't have that relationship with me early on.
Sure.
So that's where the side effects really came for me and my dad when he again tried to father me away from taking that journey. So yeah, thanks for the question too.
Thanks, Elvis. All right, so going back to the army, there are quite some achievements a 12, 18-month period. I know that firsthand. That's pretty difficult to achieve unless you're fucking good, and so you're obviously fucking good, right? So they had, I would imagine that the army was that camaraderie and structure and family unity schedule that you were probably longing for a very long time. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thrived on it. Thrived on the structure. Thrived on the discipline and just the entire regime was designed for me, my physical attributes and my mental attributes, because obviously by that time I'd been through a fair bit. So in my mind, I was attuned to the adversity and everything they threw at me, I just ate alive. So yeah, you're absolutely
Sure.
right.
Good. Okay, so then they sent you over to East Timor. You did a tour there.
Yeah. So cool.
Yeah, and you said that affected you. So what happened in East Timor, and how did that affect you over there and coming back?
Yeah, so when we got called up, it was the Indonesians, the East Timorese wanted independence from Indonesia. It was under our jurisdiction, so we were called up, put on notice, closed camp, no one was to go anywhere. We packed all our gear. We're told we're going to a warlike situation, so for us it was on. And being recon snipers, we were flown in the first wave of soldiers on the ground. We handed over from the SAS, who were on the ground securing the airport and the aerodrome. So we were effectively the spearhead. And as soon as the rest of the battalion flew in, we were pushed out to the East-West Timor border as reconnaissance sniper soldiers to stop the militia from coming over the border and murdering, raping, and punishing the East Timorese locals for wanting their independence. So we're out there on the border. We were operating very, very, quietly, very, very covertly. So each and every day and every night you went to sleep, it was wondering, you're listening for noises. We're setting up booby traps where, we never had a full night's sleep. You're always on picket. You're always on guard for that, for the enemy. So yeah, that was a highly stressful situation. And it's interesting because we spoke about it when we got back. When we really started to understand the impact that operating on that level had for us. And it wasn't like a Vietnam situation where we got to let off a lot of rounds and throw a lot of hand grenades. And I'm not saying that would have been a better outcome, but what the outcome for us is that we were wound up to a certain point and we never got to execute. We never got to fire rounds. We came very, very close. We had
full bottle burst into go and didn't get to pop.
No, we didn't. And we had guys in our sights a couple of times. We arrested guys. We were told to thump our safety catches off. That's how close we came. So here we are, hearts beating. We're revved, we're ready to go, and we didn't quite get there. So that was time and time again. And we did some pretty high risk operations. And again, it just wound us up to this point. And then here we go. Our deployment's finished after 4 months. They fly us back home to Australia, and then we just dump back into normal life. And that's where, my emotions and anger really did spiral out of control.
All right. So I have a good understanding of this sort of thing from a lot of ex-military, being around guys like that. I've got friends that are in it. They've served. So I understand firsthand what you would have been going through then. And could I just take a poke and reach out on a limb to say this or ask this question that, due to the things that you saw as a child with that man that was trying to hang himself and the beatings with your mother and all that stuff from this guy and probably some extremely highly stressful and emotional times, would you say that you became more numb about things in your teenhood to enter the army and then be in a place like East Timor, and to get that sort of emotional rush, you had to be put in extreme situations like that?
Yeah, look, it did desensitise me somewhat, and at the same point in time, there was already obviously some form of anger and emotions going on that was fed by the army, and now here we are taking that forward into an operation and not actually able to contain that. Or have an outlet for that. So again, we've got layer on layer of mixed emotion into this pot of, or what is already a lot of emotion going on for a young man, and not quite having that outlet, not quite understanding what was going on. So it just created that deeper inner turmoil for me, I think, looking back.
Okay. So coming back after East Timor, did you leave the army after that, or are you talking about going back to society, still being in the military and not having any sort of treatment or outlet to at least talk or de-escalate those emotions after going to East Timor?
Yeah, look, you just touched on it. The lack of debrief, we just dumped and sort of. I was disillusioned with the army by then. I wanted to go to the SAS. That didn't happen. So I got the gong, so to speak, or the medals for my overseas service. I'd operate as a recon sniper. I reached all the milestones over and above what I set out to achieve. So in my mind, I was ready. At the end of my 4-year service, I'd done 5 years, including my training. I was really ready for that next part of my life, that next step. So yeah, for me, it was natural. I put in my discharge. I was honourably discharged, exactly 4 years to the day. And then, progressed on from the army and shot off home, where I had mates and family and everything sort of waiting for me.
What were your plans then? What were your plans when you left? I mean, I know that feeling when you're ready to wrap up with the military, you're kind of like ready to become a civvy again. But then when you hit Civvy Street, you're kind of confused, and it's like it's weird, right? It's that transition period. There's a little transition period there. But what did you plan to do after leaving the military?
Look, I had a couple of things I wanted to do. One, I was going to go to the mines and just get a high-paying job in the mines. That was one vision. But the primary vision I had was I'd save some money from my overseas service, right? And I was always a free spirit. I used to find myself wanting to, go out and have parties, and we're all young, right? But I just had this attachment to this excitement for spontaneous things. And I had a really good mate. He's passed away now, where we would just, drop everything and go for a drive and go partying at, a town 4 hours away, for example. And so the backstory to that. So I wanted to take all the money that I had. I wanted to buy a one-way ticket to Europe with a backpack. No bookings, no hotel bookings or whatever. I just wanted to go as a free spirit. I was reading the Celestine Prophecy at the time. And, if anyone's read that book, it's a guy who's meeting different people like it's meant to happen, who point him into the next sort of direction. And then that was in my mind. And I was a free spirit, and I just wanted to go to Europe and just have an absolute blast and let my hair down, because obviously off the back of the army and being told what to do and the structure and discipline, I just wanted to let my hair down. Little did I know how far down I was going to let my hair. But I certainly didn't know what I was going home to. I had a feeling that I was going home to something, but as you discover, it was a bit of an eye opener to get home to what I witnessed.
Sure. Okay. So let's dive straight into that now. Like, this is kind of where I see a lot of guys, and I don't know if we're going to step straight into this now because I don't know your story. This is just for a quick reset to the audience. Okay, let's do that first. It's Rocstedi Podcast, episode 42. We're interviewing Drew here, who's ex biker, or say biker for the United States, but ex-bikie here in Australia. And he's really done this big turnaround with his life. He's got a couple of books coming out. He's got his podcast being released at the end of this month as well. He actually does coaching and inspirational things for people, but we're just currently going through his background now, through his childhood, through his military career, up to the point now where he's kind of, I'm going to assume, getting into and around some pretty bad boys for what's going to come up here. Now, what I've seen and spoken to, and I've had friends do, and I've had some friends come out of the military, man, and they've committed suicide. They didn't have that help and assistance to help them debrief again, like you said, was good words after getting out of the military. But then others are still looking for that high level of emotion or excitement or connection and camaraderie that you don't just get in society as well. And this is where a lot of guys do tend to join biker gangs and things like that, because you've got that there. You have got that sense of it there. There's no doubt about that. Whether it's a positive influence or not is a different question, yet they do still seem to have a lot of those elements that people are searching for. So before you answer that question, I'm going to take a message here from Skinny. He's got a message that's come through. Oh, it just disappeared. No, he maybe deleted that. He's going to try that again. But sorry, so to go ahead and answer that, was that something that you may have been still looking for?
Yeah, definitely. I had some mates back home pre-army that I was looking forward to going back to reconnecting with, and certainly there, if we want to lean into it, there was a drawback there to go back to my brother, my younger brother. When we're going through these family situations, unfortunately for us, it drove a wedge in between me and my brother and my sister, and we sort of suffered away in silence rather than coming together, unfortunately. So there were some side effects there, and I thought later on down the track when I was progressing through the army, getting out on the other side, I was going back to build a relationship with my brother and build that brotherhood back again. And interestingly, 3 months before I got out, I received a phone call from him, and he was teared up, and he'd been hit, and that for me was the cardinal sin. You don't touch my brother. So here
He'd been hit by, what do you mean? He'd been punched.
Yeah, he'd been punched.
Right. Okay.
By one of the guys that was hooked up with one of the gangs back home, and I was dropping everything. I was coming home right there. He said, "No, do your time. We'll sort it when you get back." And so that was definitely a calling to get back there, to assist my brother and to show him the love that probably he went without from me and him in the early days. So. Yeah, got out. He said, "Do your time." So I did my time. I got home, and sure enough, that weekend we went looking, and we found the guy, and we set that record straight. And that was the beginning of a very interesting journey, because getting back, he was already tied up and involved with the outlaw scene and outlaw clubs. And look, I remember getting home, and one of my other mates, unnamed, of course. This is mind you, this is within a couple of days of getting home, right? So I'm kicking back, having a beer in his room, and he's opened his cupboard, and he's put a garbage bag, and his garbage bag looked heavy. He had his hands under it, right? He's put it on the bed, and he's opened it up, and what I've seen was hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash. We're talking kilos of speed at the time, or amphetamine. We're talking 20,000-30,000 ecstasy pills, and we're talking hand pieces. So this is my first couple of days out of being in the army, and I'm just like, what have I come home to?
Right.
Yeah, so that was definitely an eye-opener.
What was your initial thought seeing all that? Of course, what have I come home to? Was it like a feeling of like regret, disbelief, or excitement? Did you want a piece of that?
Oh yeah, man, straight up. I saw the dollar signs. I saw what they were involved in, and it was a crew of my old mates that my brother had integrated his journey with. And so for me, it was okay. Let's go. We're going there, I guess.
Right. Okay. All right. Right. That message from Skinny looks like it's come through, so I'm going to play that right now. Here we go.
I just wanted to jump in here, guys, real quick and say it's a great show, Rock. Always beautiful job. Geldert, I'm listening to your story here, and I'm anxious to hear the rest of it. Got to say, to come from where you've been just so far in the story to where you obviously are now is pretty awesome. But growing up the way you did and going through the things you went through, um, I know personally I manifested what I was lacking in life or what I came up without onto other people and things in my life, and tried to find a different kind of brotherhood and different kind of family. And that's what led me down the road I went down. Um, do you think there was some of that you were just like maybe manifesting because of the way that you grew up? You were trying to find that unity and that brotherhood in something else, that family.
Thank you, the real skinny.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Getting home and warming to that brotherhood and again wanting to seek that acceptance and as you term it, skinny, manifesting that. And we'll go into this later. But yes, certainly projecting and living out the past was seeking something that was lacking in me. Well, of course, all the time I had everything I needed, but when you're young, you're living out that journey. You're programmed at that point in time, and you're living that journey out. So, again, I wasn't any different to mum. I went looking for love in all the wrong places. It's that simple. And I was looking for that external validation. I was looking for acceptance. I was looking for a brotherhood. I was looking for love. I was looking for, that loyalty, that staunch, hey, we're in this together. And yeah, that set me on a trajectory. So you're absolutely right. I was manifesting that from a very, very early age, mate. And I did. I became the product of my broken past. I understood that much later on. And there was a point in time in my life, and I'll go into this, where I stopped and I looked at the man in the mirror and said, no longer can I blame anybody. I can't blame what happened to me as a boy. I can't blame that. I can't blame the boys around me. It was time for me to own what was going on and take full ownership, 100%. But yes, certainly at that time of my life, I was looking for that validation. I was looking for those male role models, and I was looking for love in all the wrong places.
And that's totally understandable, man. You would have been about 22, I'm assuming, at that sort of age at that time. You're still young, man. Still a young pup at 22. A lot of kids, we still call them kids, still got to learn through your 20s and 30s, and it goes on, right? But especially looking for those things to validate along the way, very easily influenced at that age too. So tell us a bit how you started falling into the scene after you saw that. No, let's back up a second. Tell us about catching up with the guy that weekend. What happened there?
It's interesting. So we got word that he was one of the bouncers, and obviously connected to one of the gangs, one of the crews. And at that time, I didn't really know who was who. He was my brother. I didn't care who you were or what was going on, but you were getting it right. So we found out where he was working. It's me and my brother, and we found where he's working, and I let my brother go up to him and have his crack, and that didn't eventuate. So I actually stood in and said, "Well, how about you and I?" And he he didn't want to face me on the street. Interestingly enough, so although we didn't get the physical retribution, we got the mental retribution because he wasn't keen. And look, that was just one of many incidences, because my brother was he had a list of enemies, and we worked our way through them one by one. And as we're going to lead on to, that led me to become to draw attention from other more senior people in that lifestyle. So yeah, I became front and center pretty quickly, because I was effectively turning their town upside down.
Sure. So like, cut in and tell me if we're missing any bits here, because of course we haven't spoken about this before, and I don't want to leave anything out. But this is the track it starts to take, right? So this is what gangsters look for, and that be the mafia in New York from the old days or whatever. They're looking for scouting people with talent, right? People that can give some muscle to the name of these different gangs, even different brains for the gangs for doing what the racketeering and things like that. But being handy with your hands, probably a musty kid having experience in the military, taking on who the fuck you want to as well, because you're shortening your brother's like enemy list or making it bigger, whichever one you were doing. You're sorting that list out. What happens along the way there, man? How do you know that attention started coming onto you from these different outlaw gangs? And what did you notice? Were you making more connections that way? How were things starting to grow for you in that aspect?
Yeah. So first of all, let's look at first. I don't want to glorify, and I'm not proud of what happen. But
we're just saying the facts the way it was. You know, the way from a 22-year-old mind, 23-year-old mind to what it is today is different. I'm not sure actually how old you are. I'm 41 next month, but I know that when I was in my 20s, I was a fucking rat bag and I did not think straight. I was thinking with my dick and also trying to get into fist fights and things. Just a stupid young punk, right? So, I mean, so it's understandable if, you know, you were thinking that way. So we're not glorifying it, but we're saying it the way it is. Sometimes it's good to hear a big punch on too, you know.
And look, let's stick to the facts. And I don't glorify, actually play myself down. So, but happy to go there. But if we look back, we're looking at a young guy who has a vendetta already against men, who now is out of the army, out of the structure, and who has a free rein on exacting this anger and this revenge upon anyone that basically wants to step into this arena. And that's exactly what I did. I lost count of how many fights, and there was one particular fight. And this is just an example. I'd had a problem with one of their bouncers at a local nightclub. I got my crew together. I got them in the car without saying a word. I just said, get in the car. I took everybody home. I made sure they were safe. I drove back there. I waited for the nightclub to shut. I kicked on the door until it was answered. And I said, pick any one of your best boys and we're at it. They said, no worries, go upstairs. So I went upstairs by myself, no backup, no nothing. They 10 of them answered the door and they pushed this one Thai guy, a Muay Thai guy, a well-known guy in the town, their toughest guy, obviously. And we went at it. And it's interesting. He stepped in, he's hit me, and I've walked in and hit him, and he said, all right, that's enough. We even one-on-one. I said, no, we ain't going anywhere until one of us is down here. So we cracked on, and I got the better of him, and unfortunately they got the better of me at the end. They didn't hit me. They just held me down and until the cops got there. But this is me. By this time the momentum had gathered, right, and to the point where I was out and about. And to answer your question, this is how I became noticed, right? Because I was fighting the crew of the number one crew in town. They tracked me, they met me out, and we actually had a fight. So I was fighting them. I didn't know who they were. I didn't care who they were. But if you wanted to fight me one-on-one, I would have fought any man. No problem at all. Small.
So you're saying they were tracking you down to fight you, to test you?
No, to control me, to say,
oh, okay,
this is our town, you need to pull your head in. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
okay.
That actually happened. I had a fight with one of them, and from there on in, it was stepping actually in towards them.
Yeah. I've heard that before, right? So, you know, there's probably a lot of fights that happen with outlaw gang members to civilians, but yeah, when you start to catch their eye, it's like, hang on, we could take this kid under our wing. Be with one of us. We kind of control him in a way and work together, right? Is that sort of what happened?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And you know, by this time, you know, I was dealing drugs to facilitate my lifestyle. So I was already, by that time, I'd become entrenched, right? So it was my attitude, it was the way I was conducting myself, and it was that whole lifestyle that encompassed my entire being. And at this point in time, everything was lining up for me to take that progression into being an entrenched, underworld, or sort of that sort of figure. I didn't progress straight into being into the outlaw motorcycle club world, and I never became a full member, by the way. I was only ever a nominee, and I did that for a couple of years. But right. I was hanging around the club members for 8 or so years before that time. So it was a prolonged period of time of entrenchment of my life. It wasn't a year, it wasn't 2 years. I became a fairly well-known figure. Yeah.
So how old were you roughly at this stage? Because you started around 22 and you said about 8 years. Were you a few years into it then? And were you working, or were you just surviving by selling drugs?
Yeah, there was a 4 or 5 year period where I was dealing significant quantities of drugs. I'd been raided a couple of times. They were hot on my heel. That then led to the culmination of that town that I was living at the time was an altercation with another bike club, and that was when Not sure if you want to go there now, but that culminated in me being shot in a nightclub brawl. I actually became that put me on the news. It made me this big figurehead, and I had cameras following me around. And I just thought, this is enough. I got out of that town, but I moved to the city. And what was awaiting me on this end of the city was just a bigger fishbowl of the same thing. So yeah, that was just yeah.
All right. So we'll get to that then. So we're not jumping ahead too much. But I want to know, in the meantime, what sort of trouble were you getting into then with the law itself? How heavy were things getting? I just want to know where your mindset was going. What was your plan? Just to keep dealing, staying alive, or did you have a plan to like master something? Because I can already tell you got that like must master attitude. You know, it's like you must be the best at whatever you choose you're going to be, or whatever you choose you're going to do, you're going to master it. That's the impression I get from you straight away from when I met you the other day too. So, what was your intentions at that particular time?
No, you're absolutely right. And I was teetering on the edge, right? I was probably known as more as a gangster than an outlaw motorcycle club, identity. But the underworld, the underworld figure that I became was probably more well known, or just as well known as the other club members. So, but at that point in time, I was heavily entrenched. I'd already been charged for extortion. I beat that charge. I'd been charged for violent offences, but still teetering on the edge. Interestingly, I knew that I'd entrenched mateships with guys from the clubs, and I felt a natural draw. And again, when I shifted towns, I was still teetering on the edge. Do I make that move to become a committed outlaw motorcycle club member, or do I just stay doing what I'm doing? So there's a lot of thoughts going on in my mind at that time, for sure.
And so moving towns, I don't get it. So maybe you don't want to say the towns, or you do. I'm not sure. It's okay if you don't say them. But just from my own mind, you're talking from moving from the south to the north, or something like that, or are you talking moving from Perth to another place out of the state?
Yeah, we're talking about a southwest town of 50,000 people.
Right.
Which was Bunbury in the southwest of West Australia.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Perth, which to me was was the city. So
the big bowl. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
And again, there was a catalyst there, and that was being involved. I was an outlaw. I was an underworld figure, mixing with teetering on the edge of bike clubs, and we went up against another bike club, and that's when the shooting happened. And I was, if you want to go there,
let's go there right now. I think it's a good time, actually. Yeah. So tell us what happened. We'll let you tell that whole story from A to Z.
Out on the town every weekend. By that time, I was already making mates with the number one crew. I'd identified them as the ones that I wanted to be associated with, and they obviously vice versa. So creating carnage every weekend, out partying with one particular mate, and an opposition outlaw club, a group of outlaw motorcycle club members walked in, and my mate sort of said, "Have you got my back?" And I said, "Mate, 100%, absolutely." So he's gone up to one of the guys he's had an issue with. Long story short, they've ended up in a brawl. And I was watching his back, and one of the other members went to step in on my mate. So I became involved. So I've gone at this big guy, and he knew of me. So as I pushed him, he's fumbled around his waistline and produced a handgun. Now, at this point in time in my life, if you weren't going to shoot me, you were going to get it, right? So rather than run, which he thought we were going to, he's waved it at us, right? And I've just got furious. I said, "Yeah, you want to pull that?" And we were in a thumping nightclub, right? There's packed crowds, there's music going on.
Are people seeing this?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Were they running, or were they frozen still? Or because once they see a gun,
It was a commotion at this point in time, but no one gauged what was going on in the back corner of the nightclub, whatever. So he's waved it, thinking that we'd run. So my mate's sort of carrying on doing what he's doing, and this guy's waved it and realised I hadn't run. So I thought he was bluffing, right? So I've actually stepped towards him, shaping up, waving him on, let's go, right? He's thinking that I'm not going to come any further, so he's put it up under his shirt. Then I've got the idea now you're in big trouble now because you bluffed. I'm calling you bluff, right? So I'm stepping in. So I'm closing. We're talking about 2 meters away just before I get to unleash on him. And he's pulled this thing out and he's let the whole magazine go. So 6 shots. Bang, 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 bang. That's all I heard was just, I saw him pull it out. I saw the flash of the muzzle, everything. And yeah, I was heavily winded. He shot me very high up in the chest. So luckily for me, just missed my heart, missed my major arteries, pierced my gallbladder, my liver, and came out the back of my ribs. The other one got me through my trap here, so right along in line with my head. So I was lucky. I got 2. The mate that I was fighting with, I don't know how he got one. I think on the way out he's popped one in him at close range, but he got one through the stomach. And one of the girls in the nightclub got a ricochet off one of the cement piers in the back of her neck. So there's 4 shots out of 6 that hit someone or something. The other 2, luckily, didn't hit anybody. So yeah, it was interesting. It was a fight for my life that night. I knew it wasn't my time, even though I was laying in a pool of blood, waiting to basically die, waiting for the.
What was that like, man? What was that like? You got shot. You felt winded. Did you stumble back? I mean, tell us the feeling of what it's like to be shot.
Yeah, it is. It was a winded feeling, and the way I explain it, it's like someone driving a hot sword through you, because you can feel obviously your internals, a hot bullet, and the bullet that hit me, or the 2 bullets that hit me, were a hollow point. So this one shredded my internals. It split into about 4 different pieces. So yeah, it was winded. It's hot. It's sharp pain. But I was still conscious, and at the time I was high and half drunk, and sort of took it and leant over and put my hands on the wound and staggered out to the exit. By this time the crowd screaming, the music stopped, and there's a sea of bodies heading towards the nightclub exit. I just became another one of those bodies, fumbling my way to the exit, where I saw the bouncer and said, "I get an ambulance, I've been shot." So yeah, then it was just laying there in and out of consciousness, trying to check the wound. I lifted my shirt up. I remember I looked down at the wound, and it was bubbling away. With my army experience, I knew that my lung had been pierced. The air was bubbling the blood. So I put that lung down to make sure that I wouldn't, both lungs wouldn't fill with blood. And then it was just hanging in there for the ambulance to get there, hoping that it wasn't my time to go.
And what about your buddy? What happened to him when he was shot?
Lost a gauge of where he was completely. Later on, we obviously met at the hospital and got to catch up, but I had a bit of a fight ahead of me. 2 rounds of significant surgery. I got opened up like a butterfly from the bottom of my chest down to the top of my navel. 50 stitches. I had 2 rounds of surgery because the first time they didn't know that my liver had been pierced, and I was actually poisoning myself with the bile from my liver. So I was released and I turned green. Went back in. They opened me up, put 2 big drains out of the side of my stomachs, and it was catching the bile. And I was told that if my liver didn't stop producing that bile, that there's a potential that my liver wasn't going to heal. So it was touch and go there for a little while.
How long was that touch and go? So it would have been weeks at least, right, to get better?
Yeah, look, I was in intensive care for a couple of weeks, and then another couple of weeks on the wards before I was released to go home. And a funny story, I remember getting home, and I was relaxing, and I'd been home like in the first 12 hours, and because of my stitches, I wasn't able to stand up straight. I was still hunched over, and I'd lost 10 kilos in the space of the time that I was in hospital. And
right.
The mate that I got shot with, it was a Friday night. He's come around my house, knocked on my door, said, "Well, how you going?" I said, "Yeah, how you going, mate? Yeah, good." He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, nothing. I'm just relaxing. Just got home." And he goes, "Good, get your jeans on, get in the car." I was like, "What are you talking about? Get in the car." He's like, "Get dressed, get in the car." So I'm like, "Oh, me, mate." So I'm struggling to get dressed, put my clothes on. Drove into town, and we pulled up out the front of the nightclub that we got shot at. We've gone in. The bouncers have escorted us all, me and my mate, through to the exact place where we got shot. And we stood right where it happened, arm in arm, wearing it at the time like a badge of honour. He's looking at me like, "You right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm right." And that was effectively our way of getting back on the horse right after.
Sure. Like nothing's going to stop you. Like, I'm back, bitches. Fuck you. You can shoot me and you ain't going to kill me. Yeah. I love that. All right. All right. So that's pretty heavy. So, I mean, what starts to become the vendetta from something like that. It would hit the papers. I did see an article for that. 2003, was it 2003 when this happened?
Yeah, 2002. Yep.
2002. Okay. So, did you want to get even with this guy?
Oh yeah, of course. There was a massive vendetta, but unfortunately for him, and this is all fact again, right? Let's stick to the facts. The guy was found and charged. He was on security camera. It was all above board. So he'd been charged. So he was being heavily watched, and so were we, because at the end of the day, they knew there was going to be some form of retribution. And of course, did I want retribution? Of course I did.
Sure.
But interestingly, he was charged. He got sentenced to 9.5 years in prison. And this is all public information. He was burnt to a crisp. Apparently,
He was set on fire.
He was set on fire. Yeah,
in prison.
In prison. Yeah, the guys. I actually met a guy later on down the track in prison who actually burnt him. They got fuel from a lawnmower, not knowing that it was aviation gas. And the reason they use aviation gas is because they can't, inmates can't inhale
Right.
the avgas. It's actually an avgas petrol mix. So at the time they've doused him and they've dipped mops in fuel, and he's obviously picked the wrong crew. And they've got retribution on him by burning him to a crisp, and they wanted to hit him with these mops that were dipped in the same petrol. So that nearly took his life. He spent 3 months fighting for his life, and some very, very significant, anti-burns trauma treatment. And he was never the same. Interestingly, he got out, right? And he's picked a fight with the wrong guy again, and he was shot dead on his own driveway, picking the wrong guy. I actually met that guy in prison too, the guy who actually shot him. So.
Wow.
So that's a whole nother story there behind that. But yeah, it's interesting how his life played out, and I didn't need to lift a finger. That was obviously his own doing, his own karmic cycle. So yeah.
I actually recall hearing that story years ago about the mops setting a guy on fire. I didn't realize it was the same guy. So I don't know his name or anything, but I remember hearing that story on the streets, from what happened there. So, wow. All right. So that's a pretty heavy time of your life, man, getting shot. I mean, did you keep escalating up from there with crime and things like that? I take it you weren't nommed up at the time then, and you were still to be nommed up and sort of potentially join an outlaw motorcycle gang.
Yeah, look, at this point, I'm teetering on the edge, and I'm enjoying the notoriety and my association with the club life, and questioning what I was doing and where I was going, and if I was going to take that next step. And then after the shooting, I was all over the news, and cameras following me around, and the world sort of closed in around me. So yeah, I made the decision then to move to the city, and again, whether it wasn't so much a clean break, it was just getting away from that whole circumstance of the shooting, and being the sort of the guy caught in the spotlight. So moved to Perth, and became involved with the club up here, and that eventuated. I did work away for a little while. I went back to work. But I took away those feelings of this is not my world. This is not how I operate. And again, I felt like an outcast. I'd been that entrenched for that long. So I stopped work and made that progression, and ended up making that decision to commit to the club and to the Outlaw Motorcycle Club life, thinking that was where I belonged. We talk about my past and the camaraderie, and look, I've got a lot of respect for the clubs, and still a lot of respect for those boys. So I just want to put on record here that what stays in the club, what happens in the club stays in the club. I would never mention names or club names. I'm not here leveraging their lifestyle for my own benefit. It's a part of my past. Happy to talk about it. I've dealt with my past, and it's been a beautiful journey of healing for me. But again, from the club's perspective, yes, I made a decision, and that was it. I put my hand up, and I progressed into committing to being an Outlaw Motorcycle Club member, and became a nominee. and yeah, that committed to that lifestyle, and it was cut a bit short for a number of reasons, and no doubt we'll go into that.
All right, so I just want to also state likewise that I respectfully won't cross that line as well. I don't want, if I ask something that maybe I don't realize is potentially calling something out, just stop it there for me, because I don't want to do that. So we want to get the story at hand of the facts, not call anyone out or name any names or anything like that. But if there's a story or two that you're able to talk about without pointing anything back in that direction, please feel free to say so. So tell us, I mean, you said there's a few stories there from being a nom that stopped it short. Are you able to talk about that? Or able to talk about what path we can go down there? It's up to you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Look, during the time, again, this whole anger thing, right? I'm an angry young bull. And I had some issues controlling that anger with my own beliefs, and that spilt over, into the club life. And, let's just say it probably slowed my membership down a little bit because, sure. I had that attitude. But yeah, so.
Well, the way I imagine it real quick is that this, as much as you're in an outlaw motorcycle gang, there's still protocol to follow. And I imagine a lot of those guys have a problem with being told what to do, and there is an echelon that you have to follow as well. So yeah, I can imagine probably a younger bull, like you said, has a little bit more trouble taking some orders. I'm just speculating here, and yeah, that could potentially slow your membership down. If I'm on the right track or not, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, you're on the right track. And look, unfortunately, that was both inside the club and out, because I was looking for that notoriety on the street more in general too. So I became out of control. So yeah, that had its own impact even within that life, being that undisciplined and that probably loose and uncontrollable. So yeah, by that time I'd speared out of control. But in the latter stages, moving to the city. Let's get some context here. We're in the big city now, and we're rubbing shoulders with some pretty serious and significant identities, and that brought attention to me again, and it was from the police, and that had me involved in an undercover police operation, and that culminated in the next leg of the journey, and that was being followed everywhere and being the target of an undercover police operation.
All right, so just before we go into that, we have another message from the Real Skinny. And just to do a quick reset, we're doing Rocstedi podcast episode 42. We've got Drew Geldert here, where he's talking about his life as a child growing up, life of crime, where he totally flips that around to a positive life, where he's doing now coaching. He's got his own podcast about to be released, and a couple of books that he's releasing as well shortly. So we're going to get to all that part first, but if you do want to leave a voice message here, you can click the link if you're listening live on Fireside, and that will take you to my Instagram, where you can leave a recorded voice message and I will play it on the show, just like what Skinny's done now. So let's hear what Skinny's got to say.
I just wanted to jump in here, guys, real quick and say it's a great show, Rock. Always beautiful job. Geldert.
Hang on, that's one he played before. I don't know why that just came up, and I think he's deleted it and maybe left another one. Sorry. Some people leave the message, they delete it because maybe they hear the background sound. I thought Skinny left it. Yeah, it says a minute ago, so I don't know. Oh, here we go. He's left it again. It's just come through. Here we go.
I just wanted to ask you another quick question, Free. How hard was it to overcome the habits or the nature of living that life once you got out? Because even to this day, I sometimes still will sit in a room full of people, like at a restaurant or something, with my back against the wall, and I'll pick where I'm going to sit very strategically, if possible. And there's a stigma that comes with it too, because a lot of people, if they've known this about you, they look at you somewhat differently. But how was it overcoming that? And do you still find yourself doing those same things, sitting in a room at a strategic advantage, sizing people up? What's that like?
Thank you, Skinny.
Yeah. Rock, I'm not sure where you want to go with that, but I want to cover that comprehensively, and that's going to come out naturally in the story.
All right.
My healing journey and how I turned that around, and the
Sure.
mechanisms and the characteristics. That's all going to come.
All right.
And yeah, that's in the next leg of the journey. So hang in there.
All right, Skinny. So just hold that thought, man. That will get answered. It's a great question. I'm curious to know that myself, but this is going to flow naturally pretty soon, I imagine, because I think we've got a leg or two to go here. But tell us, sorry, what were we just up to then? We were talking about the part. Oh yeah, not taking authority so well at this particular stage. You moved to the big city,
Yep.
and so what starts to happen next?
Yeah, so like I touched on, rubbing shoulders with some of, and you're exactly right. If I was coming to the city, I was going to be the number one, outlaw motorcycle club member. I was going to be the number one gangster, the number one, underworld figure. Become heavily entrenched up in the city up here, and that brought me to the attention of the police, and I became the target of an undercover police operation.
Right. And what were you doing to become the target of that operation? Obviously, living a life of crime, but was it specifically with like a drug squad or anything like that?
Yeah, so this is totally separate to the club life. I was already dealing drugs way prior to my involvement in the Outlaw Motorcycle Club life. A lot of people try and tie it in, like say, it's Outlaw Motorcycle Club's the ones pushing drugs, and for me, this was my decision. This was my syndicate. This was my thing, and it was an international cocaine syndicate and cocaine smuggling syndicate that I was involved in at the time. Rubbing shoulders with other identities and conducting those sorts of activities. Naturally, I became the target of the undercover police operation. Took them 3 to 5 months to actually land me, to infiltrate my crew. And yeah, an undercover police operation, one introduction led to another, and I was subsequently charged with dealing commercial quantities of cocaine, and went to court and received 7 years of imprisonment for those activities. So at the time I was nomming with the club, heavily entrenched in the lifestyle, and life for me was just pulled out from under me. I had hundreds of thousands of dollars cash. I had houses, cars, everything, and that had now come to a screaming halt. So yeah, life was about to take a big turn for me.
So how did you get pinched?
Okay, so it's a funny story. I actually was dropping my son down to his daycare centre, and I looked in the rear vision mirror and I saw a car following me. It's not unusual to be followed, but this time they actually were on my heels for some time, and I dropped my son off, and then I took them for a drive through the town, and then all of a sudden I've got 3 4 drives coming head on at me. They corner me. I've got 3 coming from the back, and I was pulled out of my car on the street at gunpoint and arrested.
Okay. So you had to obviously go to court and fight this particular case.
Yeah, I did.
What happened there? I mean, everything was on hold, fell apart. What happened from there?
Yeah, luckily for me, I had great support around me. I had some pretty loyal guys at the time. I was in a relationship. So yeah, luckily enough, she stuck by me for as long as she could anyway. My daughter was just about to be born and my son was 3 years old. So the court had proceeded. I was going not guilty because I didn't feel that they had anything on me. I wanted to blame and project it was everybody else's fault at the time that I'd been done and not mine. Wasn't ready to take ownership. So I fought the charges in front of a jury and was found guilty as charged, and again sentenced to 7 years of imprisonment for just under a kilo of cocaine.
Okay, so sentenced, fought and lost court. You're in jail now. What was your mindset there? Because I know what your outcome is to where you are currently today. And I'm just wondering, going to prison, did you want to be the best prisoner you could be, and as in like the toughest prisoner you could be, the biggest dude, like ain't gonna let no one fuck with you there sort of thing? What was your mindset?
Yes, a little bit of context around that. It's, by this time I've spent, I I spent 12 months in fighting the court as in my normal life. Everything was put on hold. I had to go back to work to get some income. So there was already some stopgaps put in between me and the old crew and the old life. So I was trying to work. I was trying to catch up with them. And, this was a really, really unstable part of my life. And I felt that there was this big cloud hanging over my head. So I wasn't enjoying life. That's number one. Going into prison, I was transported from court that day to a maximum security facility. They grabbed me, put me in shackles on the other side, and led me to what I didn't know, but it was an isolation cell. And they locked me in there. And I thought, gee whiz, if this is how I'm going to spend the next 7 years of my life, this is going to be pretty tough. But little did I know that I was placed in segregation while they established my involvement in clubs and what clubs were in the maximum security facility, and if there was going to be any issues, or whether they were placing me in a vulnerable position with any enemies that we might have had. So anyway, I stayed there for 2 or 3 days. They questioned me, and at this point in time, my statement was to them was I just wanted to get on and do my time. I didn't want to be a management issue. I just wanted to do my time. Focusing on just getting it done. So I was released into the general population of the maximum security facility, and found ways to keep myself busy while I was reclassified as either a medium or minimum security prisoner. And for anyone in maximum security, everyone's looking for a way out of there, right? Unless you're on a life sentence and you're there for a prolonged period of time. The bait that they hang on you is that if you get reclassified, you behave yourself, you're not a management issue, you can either get to medium or minimum, where the luxuries are a little bit better. And I can tell you now that time in maximum security facility, for me was it was a hell. It was a concrete jungle. It was the worst of the worst. I remember sitting across from a guy that had murdered 2 innocent girls, and it is a very, very dark place full of dark people, and it's not a nice place. So for me, I was always looking to progress outside of that facility and to see how easy I could possibly do my prison sentence. Now, I coming in as an underworld figure or an outlaw motorcycle club member, of course, my demeanour at the time was, "Don't fuck with me, or you're gonna have an issue." And everyone knew who I was by this point in time. They'd seen the news, or they'd seen my charges, or they knew someone that knew someone. So effectively, I was looked after pretty well from day one. I didn't have too many issues, so I was able to get on with my time while I was reclassified to shift facilities.
All right. So one question I am curious to ask is that what was the difficult part in maximum security prison? Because, you still look fucking tough right now, man, even though you're not doing that life, right? You're a big bodybuild, strong guy. We know you can box. Now, so it's not really a fear of, I wouldn't imagine, a fear of man. What was the hard part for you?
Yeah, the hard part was I was a free spirit, and no one actually plans to do prison time, right? Least of all at a maximum security prison. So the change is just so completely, you couldn't prepare yourself for it no matter what you did. So you're in a state of shock, right? You've gone from living this life of luxury, of having what you want when you want, and then all of a sudden you're placed in this completely foreign environment. Look, you say there's no fear for a man. I didn't fear anybody, but when you're in that position, you do feel vulnerable. You feel like, hey, is there something going to happen, or is someone going to come at me with a knife, or am I going to be outnumbered, or is there going to be another outlaw motorcycle club who might have an issue with me, who might outnumber me? So there's all these things going through your mind, and then there's obviously the living conditions and just the filth and the mank that you live with day in, day out. So there's a lot of layers of complexities in living that existence, if that's what you want to call it.
Were any of those layers directed towards being stuck with your own thoughts in this room, like where you can't escape? Because I think a lot of people, it's forceful to confront yourself in these sort of specific times. Was there a fear of that?
No, there wasn't a fear of that for me. Actually, I was already fairly introverted at that time. And
Right.
what I was finding, and we'll wind into this, what I was actually finding is it was giving me time in my own mental space to really come to terms with how the heck did my life end up like this. So here I am looking at 7 years of imprisonment in this cell. It naturally makes you want to question what the heck's going on. And for me, I'm speaking from my own journey.
Sure.
That really made me want to have a look at this man in the mirror. And that was a slow wind up, and we'll go into that no doubt. But for me, it was starting to water the seeds of questioning exactly what the heck was going on in me for sure.
What point was that specifically? So I mean, was there a specific point? Was it while you were in maximum, or was it when you came out? Where did you start to look in the mirror and start to question where your life was going?
No, definitely. Very, very clearly, very, very easy for me to remember this, and I've told this story a number of times. I was interviewed and by one of the prison hierarchy who said, you're right on the border of minimum and medium. And I said, ma'am, it was actually a woman. I said, ma'am, look, if you put me in medium security, and by this time I'd done 6 or 8 months and I'd heard the stories about medium security. And medium was very violent, right? You could get away with particular areas in the prison that you could fight and rumble, and it was a culture. It's a very well known culture. And I said to her, ma'am, if you put me in that prison, you're going to turn me into an animal. I said, but I'm on the cusp. If you send me to minimum security where I can relax and get on with my time, I think I'm on the cusp of wanting to do the right thing and turn my life around and become a better person. And luckily enough for me, she said, I'm going to give you that opportunity. Advocated well enough, and I hadn't had any mishaps, in the time of maximum security. So luckily enough for me, I was classed minimum security, and I went from hell to a prison farm. I'm talking about trees. I'm talking about birds. I'm talking about rose bushes. And for me, it was like, oh wow, this was a gift for me. And this was a time where, as I got to settle into the minimum security life, where I just went, wow, this is my time. This is a gift to me. And I started to dig. I started to dig real deep on who I was and where I'd come from. And I took myself back to being a little boy, about wanted to understand why I was so angry. I was just angry. That was taking a lot of energy for me, and I wanted to understand that because I knew I wasn't happy, not happy in myself. I'm talking about not my external environment, and I started to quickly understand that this was going to be a massive opportunity for me, and not an opportunity to punish me, an opportunity to set me free. And now it's ironic that I misspelt my name. I'm free.
Maybe you keep it like that.
Yeah, that's
Geldert.
Right.
It was a spell check when he signed up on this account, ladies and gentlemen, and when he went to put his name Drew, it came up as free, but it's starting to suit right now a little bit more. But listen, sorry, the time when you started just saying about how you went to prison, my son was knocking on the door here, distracting the hell out of me because he's trying to get me. So I heard my wife come and take him away. But one thing I wanted to know is the comparison, obviously, from the prison farm, which I'm assuming is Woolloomooloo Prison Farm.
Yep.
Yeah, and you went from Casuarina, maximum security.
Hakia. Yep.
Hakia, okay. So that's maximum, is it? Hakia?
Yeah,
I thought it was like just a remand. Okay. So your what were the comparison with like the timings? Were you locked up like 23 hours a day and get like 1 hour out or something like that, compared to going to a farm where you can from what I hear, you can hop the fence if you want to and run away, but if you get caught, then you get straight back to the other places, right? Something like that.
Exactly. It was from a 23-hour lockdown controlled situation, all your movements controlled, to a farm, which, yes, you've got a fence around you. You can't just jump the fence. You can get over the fence, no problem. The fence opens up 20 times a day because you're allowed to come in and out of the prison to engage in work parties. And, I became the captain of the footy team. We played in the local league. But yeah, so we're living in a room now. We've gone from a cell to a prison farm room. And if you're on the lower decks, you have to share a room. It's all control. You behave yourself. You get up into a single room. Then you go from a single room into self-care. And self-care, you've got a little kitchenette. You get your own food. You can cook for yourself, clean for yourself. So there's a lot more freedoms in that facility. And I quickly progressed You have to work to be in a prison farm. You have to be contributing to a job. For me, I chose to study. I got a bug for learning, and I was already involved in business. Of course, I was an entrepreneur. It was all misdirected, of course, being wanting to be the next Pablo Escobar.
But you're a damn good entrepreneur, even though it was directed in the wrong way.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. I had that inspiration. I wanted to be successful. So, I took that. There are a number of catalysts for me in understanding who I was and the demeanor and how I was holding myself and how I was feeling. That was the start of me taking a deep dive in how I'm going to be spending the rest of my time. What am I going to do with this time to better myself? What am I going to learn about myself? How am I going to shape this journey? And there were some really, really beautiful things that happened to me to be able to light my journey, light my path through the next, what was 4 years of incarceration at the prison farm.
Okay, so when you kind of decided to zig instead of zag and chose to study because you had the bug for it, what was your plan? Because you could study, but you really studied to turn your life around. What subjects did you choose? What did you study specifically?
Yeah, so I went into and there's a couple of things that happened at the same time, right? I identified that I didn't want to go to work and do some meaningless task that wasn't going to benefit me. So I sunk my teeth into a diploma of project management because I was already in business, had my own trucking company in that as well as obviously what I was doing. So you studied project management and then went into study a full business degree. About the same time, I'm reflecting, right? I'm saying I'm angry. Why am I angry? So I've gone back to my childhood. I'm connecting to what's happened to me and what's shaped my life, right? And here I am realizing that I'm starting to look in the mirror. And the more I look in the mirror, the more I want to understand myself and not run from myself, right? So I started to, I went into the fact that I've punished my children. I've done exactly what my own father, in some sense, had done to me. So that was a big fear that I had to grapple with and understand. I had nowhere to run. I wanted to own the fact that I'd put myself in here. No more blame, no more running, no more projecting. This is my deal. I put myself here, and this is my time, right? So I started to want to forgive myself for those mistakes. Now, about the same time, here's something really important. I realized how ego-driven I'd become. I would stand in line at the front of the food line, and I'm thinking, you know what? Anyone stands in front of me, it's on. I don't care. And I would defend that position
in the prison farm.
At the prison farm. I would stand at the front of the food line and I would defend that with all of my honour. And I started to think, why would I do that? I progressed to self-care, and we had jobs to do in self-care, like clean the bathroom. I would be thinking, no, I don't clean anybody's bathroom. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you to clean my bathroom and you're going to clean my bathroom for me, right? So there were all these behaviours and mannerisms that I was living by that I started to question because I was angry and I wasn't happy, right? So I started to challenge that. Right? I started to put myself at the back of the food line, right? And I remember specifically, I waited for every single person, broken, fat, tall, skinny, didn't matter. I waited for everybody to eat, right? Then I got to the food line and there was an abundance of food there, right? Because at the front of the line, you're not allowed to take too much because everyone's got to be fed. But if there's enough at the end, you can take seconds. So being the last guy to eat, I could fill my plate up. So it was like, I had this epiphany, like, hang on a minute, I've just humbled myself. I'm humbling my ego here. This is the exercise for me. I'm humbling my ego and I'm getting rewarded for that. Bang. My thoughts start firing. I went to scrub those bathrooms better than I scrubbed them at my own home, right? Thinking that, I'm no better than anybody and I want to contribute and I want to be the best that I can possibly be. And this was a very, very start of my journey and the start of me curtailing these behaviors. So here I was studying. I went so far as to go into conversations not wanting to speak badly about people, not wanting to swear, which was a huge thing for me, right? Because, you got to think, right? Here I am. Everyone's holding me to this underworld, this bikie character. They were coming to me with conversations and wanted me to engage on this level, right? And I wasn't, I'd get sucked in, or I would fail, or I'd swear or something. And I'm thinking, am I just setting myself up to fail here, or am I actually driving myself nuts, or what's going on here? But I just stayed committed. I just knew that this was my time. And it went so far, even the prison security guards were trying to hold me to an old sense of identity. I remember one time there was an incident on the bus. We were going out to play footy, and I was the team captain. On the way back, all the boys, all the prisoners back of the bus were just bagging this prison officer, like they were really going off at him. We got back to the prison. They've thrown me straight into isolation and said, "You're the captain of the footy team. We have to make an example of you." I was like, "Hang on a minute. I can't be seen to be, intervening. Otherwise, I would get punished by the prisoners." So, long story short, they've said, "Right, we're going to punish you." I said, "Okay, no worries." I just knew that this was a test of my authenticity on this new journey. Was I going to accept it? Was I, they were waiting for me to bark up or kick back. So anyway, they put me in this van. I'm getting comfortable. They said, "You're going to this prison called Greenock," right? And Greenock is, I didn't know what I was going to, but it is the worst of the worst, even worse facility than the maximum security. And I don't say that lightly. So I'm on this van thinking, it's going to be a fairly long drive. It's about 4 hours drive to this other facility. And we pulled in at this airport. I'm thinking, I must be picking someone up or something. No, they've shackled me up on Con Air. They put me on a plane. They flew me to Greenock for 28 days down the back in isolation. I was studying my degree at the time, was trying to make this progression, and I was just getting challenged from every single angle on this, being held to this old sense of identity. So you've got to think, here I am trying to study a degree, trying to humble my ego, getting punished by the prison hierarchy. Everything was trying to make me shift back to this old identity that I was wearing. But I was just seeing everything as a test. And Skinny, to answer your question, this is where I started to shift my entire being, right? And I was lucky enough to have two beautiful shining lights, and they were the prison chaplains. And for many, many months, they would interact with me, say good day, and I actually met them through another guy that had a Christian family, and he introduced me to them. They never mentioned anything about God or Bible bashing or anything. I just thought these guys were just beautiful guys, and I thought this is a relationship that I actually want to conduct with these men, right? They were just beautiful. They would talk to me about normal stuff, and they liked bikes, and they knew I did, and we talked about bikes. And over time, I got to really trust and respect those men more than, and I closed off from everybody in the prison, right? I shut down. I was studying 8, 10, 12 hours a day. I was working on myself. I was working through my past. I was highly, highly driven and focused on using every single day in there for my own benefit. This was a huge opportunity for me, right? It wasn't a punishment anymore. This was a gift. And I was going to use every single minute of every single day to become the best version of myself, so that when I got out, I could just change the world. If I can change me, I can change everything out there, right? So this was my mission. And one of the catalysts, if I may, before I'll let you jump back in, Joey.
Sure.
I remember a conversation with one of those prison chaplains where I became to trust and love him so much. We went into the fact of why are you so angry? And I remember feeling so weak and so vulnerable about talking to him about what happened to me when I was young and what I saw and what I witnessed, that I've said this often, I felt like I was sitting there naked, right? I felt weak. It was counterintuitive. My whole fear inside was saying, don't you tell him. He's going to use it against you. You don't need to talk to anybody about this. You bury this. You don't need to talk to anybody about this, right? So I did. I breached that fear, and I said, look, this is what I've been through, and this is what I'm battling, and I just let it all go. And there was tears, and he held that space for me and made me feel safe. And I walked away from that conversation knowing that that was the best thing that I've ever done for myself, hands down. And that was, I started to get a grip on the fact that everything that I'd harbored over my entire life was eating me alive, and that I'd become the product of that environment, that past environment. And again, these are all thoughts that are going off on, like, the epiphanies, the realizations, the ownership, progressing through forgiveness, wanting to let go. I took myself back. I forgive everybody that ever hurt me. I forgave myself for hurting people, for all the fights, for all the the situations. And forgiveness is a huge thing. Right? If you can learn to forgive not just other people but yourself, you start to let go. Right? You can shift that weight of energy from your shoulders, and all these things were happening to me. You got to think this has all happened to me in the space of sort of 6 to 12 months, and it's a huge part, a huge catalyst of my journey that set me on a trajectory for the rest of the time, which was to release and unfold this new version of me. And one of the other things, if I may, Joe, before we carry on, I look back at myself as a kid, and all I wanted to be was loved. And my mother gave me that, and I missed out on it as a father, and I knew it. I saw it very, very clearly, and I just wanted to be loved and respected. And that was the unfolding of a spiritual journey for me. And I remember one of the chaplains, looking at me and saying, God loves you. And I was like, what do you mean God loves me? And that was another unfolding of a journey. It was a connection to the universe, and that I had a place in this universe, and that I was, and I'm not a religious person. I'm a spiritual person, by the way. But I started to think about my place in the universe. So again, there's all these components going on, Skinny, and to answer your question, there's all these components going on, and were there side effects, were there scars of this old life and the old situations and the old anxieties? Oh yeah, man. And I had many, many challenges to work my way through that, many, many tests showing me, and I failed a lot of them, but I had this unwavering thirst to progress through and again, use my prison journey for something that was meant for good and not for bad.
Mate, that's truly inspirational. I can feel your energy when you talk about this. It's where everything really heightens up in that story, man. And what's astounding and phenomenal is that you've totally turned around a situation that people look at in a negative way of being locked up, losing time. You've turned it to cherishing time and making the most of that time to utilize the change in yourself. So this was kind of almost like, from what I'm hearing, the opportunity to be locked off from around the world, from the outside world's distractions, to introvert yourself in this world and work on yourself completely and wholly. Like, it almost sounded like the 8 to 10 hours that you've been studying locked up for that 28 days was almost like, I can knuckle down and fucking study here with zero distractions, almost in a way like that,
Man, you're exactly right. And this was my mindset. My mindset started to morph into this: nothing is happening to me, everything is happening for me. And if I can turn every single situation, doesn't matter whether they wanted to send me to the worst facility in the world, or they wanted to trample me, or a prison wanted to test me, if everything is not happening to me but for me, everything becomes an opportunity. And that's the mindset that I took into every single day. And I wasn't there for 6 months, man. I was in that facility for 4.5 years before.
Well, that's one of my questions. How far into that stint was this realization where you started to work on yourself?
So
towards the start?
Yeah, it was towards the start, but it was a gentle progression, because my mentality was stifled in maximum security, because you're in fight or flight, right? So yeah, there was elements of it there, but as soon as I hit that minimum security and was able to relax out of fight or flight state, and then come to terms with the fact that I was going to be there for an extended period of time, that's when I started to think, you know what, if I'm here now, I may as well not fight against it. I may as well go with it. And what can I do with each and every day to become a better father? Because I started fathering from that place of hurt. I was trying to compensate, and that wasn't healthy. I realized that. So I had to somehow find this place of peace. And that's when I went on this journey of forgiveness. I'll tell you a quick story about how I realized that. I was lucky enough through the chaplains, to become involved in a course called Sycamore Tree Program. We got to meet a beautiful couple, an elderly couple whose son had been brutally stabbed over 30 times by a drug addict, and was murdered over an insignificant issue. I watched them tell the story of how their son was brutally murdered, breaking down into tears. And I reflected on the level of impact that I had through my journey and the aggressive nature of my journey, but also my conduct of dealing drugs, and the impact that my behavior and my involvement in dealing drugs could have had on a guy like that. and an innocent guy. So I started to think, hang on a minute, I've got to own the fact that I could have had a hand in that exact situation, and watching them. And the story went that that the guy did, he got sentenced to life, right? He's come to the end of his sentence, and they've gone to ask this beautiful couple if they'll support his parole or they will deny it. Now, the first year they denied it, and they told the story that they were living out an absolute hatred for this man. Every single day of their life was, we hate him, we want vengeance, we want him put away for life, we never want to see him. They objected his parole. Something happened in their life where they knew that they were being eaten alive by the occurrence of this guy killing their son, right? So what they actually did is they wanted to let go. So they went into prison, they met with this particular gentleman, they forgave him, they hugged him, and they supported his parole release. And the catalyst here was understanding the power of forgiveness. They that forgiveness set them free, right, from the hurt and the anguish of their son's murder. And bang, bang, my thoughts are going, hang on a minute, forgiveness. Look at what they've done. They set themselves free. So I wanted to then say, I need to capture that. I need to capture what they've just lived, and that is the power of forgiveness. I wasn't going to. I wanted to own my mistakes and own the fact that I was already on that journey, right? I already owned it. I already turned and faced myself, right? But there was a component missing, and that was the forgiveness part. I needed to go back. I need to forgive myself for the wrongs. I was projecting my past. I was the product of my past environment. But in order to let go, I needed to forgive everyone that had hurt me and everyone that I hurt. That was a massive catalyst in my journey. Was again forgiveness. And once that shift was done, I was in clear headway. And again, there was a lot of tests to test my authenticity on that path. But here I am, impassioned and excited about every day of being in prison on a lengthy prison sentence, and using every single situation. And you're right, Joey, for my good. I wasn't being punished. And as a matter of fact, the fence around me became a concept. I could get out any day I wanted. I was out I was captain of the team the footy team. I could have walked off that oval and ran any time I wanted. So the fence around me became a concept, right? I was free. I was becoming free. I got sent to prison in a lengthy prison term, not too long, not too short, because if I'd been in and out in 6 or 12 months, it might not have stuck with me, right? So here I am, knowing that the perfect amount of time I'd been given, I'd been incarcerated for the perfect amount of time to turn my life around, so that when I got out on the other side, I could be a better man, a better father, better husband, better society member. So for me, I was in a race against myself for how much healing and how much positivity I could learn inside of jail, so that when I got out that day, I was the best version of myself I could possibly manage.
That's just so inspiring. I have something I want to add to that, and we have a couple of messages and a written one too, so I'll get to them in a sec. One thing I've heard often is that power of forgiveness is like a superpower, a gift that does set you free, right? And I've heard this story after story from people, person after person that's been in these situations. I understand the concept of it. I just can't get my head around it sometimes with some completely traumatic situations. For example, there's I did a podcast with Jody Pochet, whose father shot dead his pedophile attacker when he was young. That kind of I think allowed him to grow up without having that monster ever revisiting him mentally, because he seemed to be quite fine and positively moved on with his life. But there's a lot of victims that don't easily move on from something like that. Yet the way to move on is to forgive something terrible that's happened like that to them. And I still don't know how I ever would forgive something like that if it had happened to me or someone I know or a kid. I just don't know how I can. Yet I hear it over and over and over. I don't know if there's a better way to break it down than to actually be in the moment and have to be ready to forgive. But I know it's a powerful thing. I have trouble getting my head around that.
Let me explain that for you, right?
Sure.
Very, very important. People link forgiveness with justification. You are not in forgiving yourself or forgiving anybody else's wrong, you are not justifying the act, right? And I'll give you an example. The man that hurt my mum and that impacted me massively, right? I don't forgive his actions, right? What I did, and I encourage anyone to take, and I coach on this exact, it's dealing with trauma, right? When you disconnect from a person's actions and you attach their behaviors to their own brokenness, you understand that they're just a soul in turmoil. They hate, they love, they breathe, they eat just like any other normal soul. It wasn't them in their ultimate form would have never conducted a crime or that action, right? So you can separate the action from the soul. That's number one. Journeying through forgiveness, you do not justify anyone's actions. Forgiveness is not about justification. It's not saying what you did was okay, right? You can forgive. The terminology is you forgive, but you never forget, right? Forgiveness is saying that I am going to become so complete in my healing and so whole that I'm going to set myself free from your behavior and your actions, right? I'm going to let that go. I'm not going to justify your actions, never, ever. You don't have to do that as a part of forgiveness, right? Forgiveness is the healing of the soul, is putting the soul back to its original form. And people call it the inner child or whatever, however you want to term it. It is putting the soul back together and saying, I'm no longer going to be a victim. It's taking your power back. It's putting the jigsaw pieces back together to say, I'm going to heal. I'm going to forgive myself for being the victim of your actions and your behavior, and I'm going to forgive you, and that cuts me loose. So it's a weird way it works, a funny way it works, because what that does energetically, and we're all energetic beings, you're severing your energy from that person, right? You're reclaiming your energy back to you, back to your soul, and you're giving back to that person what is energetically theirs, right? So this is very, very important. You can become whole and complete again. It is a journey. It's tough. It's confronting. But forgiveness is a very, very important part of becoming the best version of yourself, the complete version of yourself, especially if you've lived through a traumatic event. And I know a lot of people will say, someone shot my brother or shot my mum. How can I ever forgive? How can I forgive that? But if you break it down into those components, I believe, just like I watched that couple forgive that murderer, I've seen and I've witnessed in myself and in others the power of forgiveness. If they segment that out, right? They separate out the behavior and the action. You're not forgiving the act. You can never. But what you're doing is you're putting back in place this whole energy system of the soul. And again, that is severing the energetic cord, because if I'm hating on someone, I'm giving that energy, right? So that's continually bleeding my energy. I'm saying, no, I'm reclaiming that energy, and that is the power of forgiveness.
Thank you for thoroughly explaining that. That made so much sense to me just then, that it's the separation of justification. It's a huge thing that you just stated there, because that's in my mind what I'd always be attaching it to. So, man, that was brilliant. I don't know if that was your own explanation or not, but that was brilliant. So thank you very much. Right, we have some messages for you. First, we've got a couple of text ones on the screen. Diana, who works with, she does a podcast here on Fireside for actually dealing with trauma. Forgiveness was the first key for me too. I had to really understand what it was. The next message from her is, it's a miracle. And the third one from her, it's not absolution. We don't have that kind of power, but thanks for this clarification. So she's thanking you for that. Thank you, Diana, for joining in with that. We've got a couple of messages. We've got three. So here we go. First, we've got the King.
Man, I just got to say, you're definitely loved and respected here on this platform with these people here. This is a good group of folks that you got speaking to, and I hope you got going to plan on doing some more shows here. Also, do you ever go back and reach out to people who might be in the position you were in at the time? Like, do you ever go to a prison and talk to some guys that might need to just hear that somebody wants to listen? I mean, to me, that's the ultimate respect, is when you just are willing to listen to somebody and hear their side. And then the way you can show them love is by giving them advice and doing what you're doing right now, sharing your story, helping people move on to the next step in their journey. God bless you, man. Thank you very much for this talk. Appreciate it.
Thank you, King. Over to you, Drew.
Yeah, look, absolutely. As King, was it?
That was Elvis, yeah.
Oh, Elvis, sorry. Elvis, mate, the completion, the full circle of the healing journey, and an absolute privilege and pleasure for any human being is to use their own experience and their own brokers and their own journey for the betterment of others. If I could get the opportunity to speak to a group of prisoners, to speak to any prisoner or any prison in a crowd, I'd go into a prison and I would tell them of my journey. I stand in my authenticity, mate. It's been such a beautiful journey and progression back into love, holding the value of myself, opening my own heart space up and mind, and connecting to my own journey again for the betterment of others. So through my coaching and mentoring business, and that's the full circle for me. We can wind up on that later, but giving back in an act of service now, drawing on all that experience. And I knew there was a catalyst for me when I got out, when I connected to my passion and my purpose. And it's funny, I've looked back as a child, and there was some really, really key moments where I thought, what the heck is going on here? Why am I experiencing this? And later on down the track, post-prison, it's all hit me. I've gone, wow, I'm supposed to be in service. I'm supposed to be now drawing on my journey for the betterment of others. I've lived out, I've listened to motivational speakers. I was listening to thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of podcasts, self-help books, you name it, I've read it, I've studied it. I've done Tantra, holistic healing, Reiki, coaching, success coaching. I lived all of it. Everything I heard, I'd already lived out through my own journey, and you don't get those reading materials in prison. So I knew that I had no competition. I had lived that journey. I had lived that healing journey, and again, to give that journey back is my greatest privilege and my greatest pleasure, and it's definitely, certainly an honour that I get to speak that. And one of the catalysts is love. Nothing exists outside of love. Once you love yourself, you can then start that being mirrored to you in your external environment. But it can't happen the other way until you know what a benchmark of love is. And I read this in the Bible when I was inside, because you don't get a lot of reading material, but just the benchmark of, for example, love your neighbor as you love yourself, and all these other things. It was like, wow, I never had this benchmark. I never had this behavioral benchmark to guide myself. No one taught me this stuff, right? So for me, I fought for myself. I worked my way back into love with myself, into love with other people, into love with the world, from a place of darkness, from anger, from condemnation, from distrust, from all of the brokenness that I'd lived through. And for me, that's the essence, the human journey, the essence of the human journey is to work yourself back into love, back into open heart, back into this law of one. People say, different race, different color, different. It's all just false. It's a lie. There's no difference between anyone from Russia, China, America. We're all just led by different governments, right? And this is something I'm passionate about, and that is, if we can change ourselves, we can change the world, and I've lived that. Look, that's another topic we can dive into, but effectively living from this place of love, in love with yourself, and watching that love be mirrored back to you in your external environment. Again, the essence of the human journey.
Great answer, man. That's a great answer to Elvis's question. We've got two more, one from Skinny and one from Joey, one back from Skinny. So let's hear what they got to say.
First off, Free, I want to thank you for answering my question. And I also want to say real quickly, I love what you were saying about forgiveness, because that is the key. And I think what people have to realize is you're not forgiving these people for what they did to you necessarily. I mean, the action, as you said. And you're not forgiving them for them. You're forgiving them for you. That's the thing. And a lot of people, they go to somebody and say, well, I forgive you. And the person says, well, fuck you. And then it's all kind of screwed up and all that. But you can't go in with the idea that you're forgiving them for them, because they may very well reject that forgiveness, and so be it. But you're forgiving them for yourself, because they don't need to be taking up space in your head and your heart if they're not paying rent. You know what I'm saying? So you got to do it for you. And that's the basic idea. But yeah, there's no justification. It's just forgiving them.
Thanks, Skinny.
Yeah, it's exactly right, Skinny. What happens through forgiveness is that we're connecting to the fact, and the truth is that the more we want to come back into love, into the love of our own heart, we can't house judgment, condemnation, anger. These things are in direct contrast to love. So when you start to value yourself and your contribution as a beautiful and divine creation, which we all are, we see divinity in nature all the time. The blueprint of nature is love. When we become separated from that, we become layered in emotion, brokenness, damage, trauma. All these things are layers upon layers that keep us from this entity of love. Now, if you can't forgive, you can't let go, you become the glass ceiling to your own love. So wanting to progress through that is capturing forgiveness. And you're not, again, you're so right, Skinny, you're not justifying the behavior at all. You're valuing yourself and your own healing journey so much that you want to let go. You're called to let that go, right? To forgive is to let go, is to reclaim energy from places it's not meant to be. And to vibrate, we're all a vibration, we're all energy here, right? And if you don't understand that, we're going to do a whole nother show on that, right? But when you want to vibrate really, really high, and you want to see that vibration mirrored to you in your external environment, you need to let go, right? It's a necessity to be able to be a high vibe human, to be a healed human, right? To be the best version of yourself. It's a critical part of the journey, and look, it's different for everybody. People do, I believe, a lot of, and I think that's what we're touching on. The truth here, the fact is that there's a lot of misconception about forgiveness, but understood in its correct form, forgiveness becomes this very, very, very powerful human transformation catalyst.
Amazing, man. Yeah. You actually made me realize today. I knew it before, but I didn't understand it till the way that you broke that down. We've got a few more messages here. Let's sort of punch through these. We've got Joey Butts.
Hey, Rocky. Sorry for the late appearance, bro. I'm here free. Nice to meet you. Great to see you on my buddy's show. But the whole forgiveness thing of somebody, like when it comes to, murdering of a family member, son, God forbid, your child or whatever, but like, that's amazing to me. I don't know if I could ever do it. I'm sure I don't want to ever even put in that situation, but seems almost impossible to think. Well, honestly, if it's possible, I would like to be able to do that if the situation came to it. But man, like the hatred that you must feel at first is like, how could anything ever overpower that? I wonder. I don't know. Either way, good to hear from you guys. Just wanted to comment and let you know as I was here. See ya.
Thanks, Joey. Thank you very much. We've got next message from Skinny. Then we've got a couple more from Joey. So we've got Skinny.
And I just want to say this real quick, too. I respect the fact that you're telling your story, because a lot of people don't get to hear this side of the life that you were in. They don't get to understand the meat and potatoes of what draws men like us into certain things and what's really all involved in it, mentally and emotionally and whatever. But I appreciate the fact that you said you still have respect for that life and the people in that life. And that's very much how I feel. So it's good to hear somebody else say that, because though there was a lot of bad and obviously enough for me to get out, there were still some things that I learned and some things that I carry with me that were good, that were positive. So, I guess it depends on how you look at it, but I'm just so appreciative of you and your story. Much, much respect to you. Rock, much respect, my brother.
Thank you very much, Skinny. Love you, man. Thank you very much. We have a couple more from Joey. Bro, you're going to have some podcasters approaching you to do more podcasts here. You realize that, right? And we've got people that work with trauma, people that want to put you in the hot seat. So there's listeners here that will want to get involved with you. Here we go. We've got Joey Butts.
Now, Mr. Free, one more question. This is a question. When I was a kid, Catholic, did the whole catechism, confirmation, communion thing. I had to regularly go and do confession to my priest who barely spoke English. So either way, I remember literally saying to him when I was a kid, too little probably, that I called my brother a turd burglar. As one of the things that, when all I had to say is I did something bad. However, do these our fathers, our Father who art in heaven. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Now, my mind changed on that right there. That always stuck with me, but it changed how I felt about that. That right there, that part of the prayer is the way you forgive people, the way you're talking, like, is it even necessary if you're getting this thing off of your chest to tell the person and just like relieving your energy into hating that person? Is it even necessary to
follow up right here? Sorry,
I wanted to finish it quicker than that. I don't articulate the best. Is it even necessary to say, well, I forgive you, because when it's just kind of getting that off of your chest, for you to let them know that, could you just kind of or is that part of the process? Could you just kind of get away from it by going, well, I absolve myself of this hatred and this energy I'm putting into it, without going to that person and saying it? Or is that all part of it, just facing that?
No, look, let's be very clear here. You absolutely do not need to go to that person and speak of forgiveness of them. What is important is the power of the spoken word. A thought is not a thought is a vibration, it's a frequency, but the power is, every single spirituality understands the power of the spoken word. So if you speak of that forgiveness, I hereby let you go. I hereby forgive your brokenness, and I forgive you. I forgive the harm that you did, and I let you go. If you say that, it is done, and you believe it, it is done right then and there. And you might delve back into thoughts of hate or of condemnation. You bring yourself back to that affirmation. I forgive you. I let you go. You can't harm me anymore. I choose me. I choose love. And love is an all-forgiving, non-judgmental entity that can set me free. And I want to be the highest being that I can possibly be. And so, yeah, again, to answer your question, you do not need to go to that person, and you do not need to say, I forgive you. You say it out loud and it is done.
Good response. Good question. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that. All right. So just going back on to now, we're flipping all to this positive part, which is great, man. Like, see how much more interactive this is too, by the way. You're doing your time. Your time comes to an end. What's life like for you now when you leave prison with this new mindset and the work that you've been doing on yourself?
Okay, so drawing towards the end of being a minimum security facility prisoner, I worked my way very hard through many, many tests. So I was chosen as one of the only people to apply at that point in time for a large logistics firm. So I entered a work release for the highest privileged prisoners. It was the last 12 months last 6 months, you could go to work every day in the community. You'd be paid, you could save some money, you can send some money to your family. So luckily enough, I was able to engage in the workforce for the 6 months. I began home leaves in that last 6 months. I was going home once a day, and they build up to 2 days, and then you stay over the weekend. So my prison journey started to be, I was able to manage that period of change by, again, work release and home release. So the day of release, my prison release came. I had my long-term partner at the time, and my 2 kids come to pick me up, and very, very surreal, getting out of that uniform and putting your normal clothes on, and really knowing that my journey was about to be unleashed into a different world, but also knowing that, looking back, that this place has been an incredible place of transformation, and leaving that behind now. And obviously I was absolutely over the moon to get out, knowing that there was a new world a new person that I'd become on the other side of that fence. But yeah, it was mixed emotions, and I was that motivated. During my time of work release, for example, I wrote a report for the state manager of Toll, of the logistics place I was working for, and I used all the stuff that I'd studied in my degree to do a strategic analysis, and I typed it out in the prison farm, and I handed it to him, and he met with me, and this was what I was doing to step into this new version of myself, and I tell you what, guys, when I got out, I had one vision. I was going to be the most successful ex-prisoner that had ever walked the planet. Right. So through the study of my degree and getting out and achieving, and now with the opportunity to achieve my fullest potential, which I hadn't reached, I don't believe, in all my life, I had this wave of energy and this wave of drive towards achievement. So I got out. I got a job with I still work for Toll, but they wouldn't progress me through the ranks quick enough, so I went looking for another job. Got a job in a mining services company as a site supervisor with my study and with everything I'd done, and progressed my way very quickly into project manager. And then into managing contracts of between about 30 and 50 million, for the likes of, the biggest miners in the world, Rio Tinto, Roy Hill Mineral Resources, executing big projects with 30, 40, 50 guys underneath me. I worked hard. I saved that money. I didn't want to do fly in, fly out anymore. So I worked my way into a deal. Again, this entrepreneurial drive that I'd translated into the legitimate world now. And I acquired another construction company. It was about $500,000 worth. We put a small upfront fee up, and I negotiated the rest on vendor finance. And I bounced into business, and I was going to become the biggest multimillionaire construction business mogul that I possibly could. This was just pre-COVID, and unfortunately, we weren't winning the amount of contracts that we needed to facilitate our overheads, and we ended up closing that business down. But during that journey, by the way, at the same time I lost my company, my long-term partner had enough of my antics after I told her that we're about to lose everything. And after 18 years, she decided that she'd had enough, and rightly so. I don't blame her for that. So I left the house that night with after breaking my kids' heart at the age of 8 or 9 years old, after returning and integrating back into their lives. That was about a period of 2 years. So there I was, ex-prisoner, wannabe entrepreneur, business mogul. I just failed at business, and I just failed my relationship. So again, there I was with a bag of clothes, sleeping at the workshop, my construction business workshop, knowing that wasn't certain either. But I just had this knowing, deep knowing, that this journey that lay ahead for me was going to take its own personality. And even though it wasn't with my partner, and it wasn't in the house, and it wasn't the business, there was another journey there for me. So again, this was about the time where I started to really go, okay, what does this all mean? How can I turn this negative situation, what was supposed to be negative, into a positive, and use this as an opportunity? And I started to realize that I wasn't being fulfilled by the level of success in that I was the managing director of my multi-million-dollar construction business. And it was. We turned it around. We built that company from $1 million company to we're on track for $6 or $7 million turnover. But I wasn't feeling fulfilled. I thought having all this money and all this success, it was going to satisfy me, and it didn't. What did was the component of leadership, and managing projects and managing teams, and being able to get teams to really focus on
building a culture.
Yeah. Using that energy that I had to paint a vision, and to get people from different walks of life, different cultures, to come together and focus on a shared outcome. That was really impassioning me, and I was really good at it. So I took some time off to heal, realizing that my passion and my purpose was now giving that back, and that was I connected to my journey. I reflected on everything that I'd done, everything I achieved, where I'd got, and I realized that in all the failures that I had was enabling me to live an experience that other people needed to hear and learn about, and I started doing that, and again, I had this epiphany. The epiphany was that I needed to give this back. I needed to be in service. I needed to help other people live that healing journey and tap into the power of themselves like I was. Even though I just lost an 18-year relationship, my business, I just knew that this was a catalyst for the next leg of my journey. And again, it was just, shifting that, transmuting that, and then following this calling that I had. And it was a calling. And, I looked at my old life and who was going to judge me. And I was going to be stepping into the public arena and telling my story. And that brought its own number of fears as well. I had to progress through those fears and stand in my authenticity. This was a calling, right? This was a massive calling, a massive shift. And I just wanted to follow it with all my heart, mind and soul. So again, that was the progression into the next journey, the next phase of my life.
I want to go into asking about your relationship with your wife at the time. Curious to know that, you've been together, and I didn't ask you a question about if you had kids or that prior to you going to prison, but obviously you did. Obviously they were quite young when you went to prison. I'm wondering that after you did that 7 years, what was the relationship like? And you don't have to go into this if it's private or anything, but more so that you'd been apart for so many years, right? 7 years. Then to be back together, of course, it's nice to see each other again, spend time hanging around and catching up. But I wonder if you get adjusted to being almost like you're single in a way, or your own time for so long. Was that difficult for both you and your partner or ex-partner at the time to then be sort of thrust together after that much time apart?
Oh yeah, it was tough, and I knew getting out that she would have had her own life, been running things her own way. But I went in one person and came out a very different person.
Yeah, that's
And
another part to the question, right? Yeah, absolutely. You're so different to the person you went in as well, like the person she knew before, which she would have witnessed transitioning along the way to be living with. You're a different man, completely different man.
yeah,
What was that like?
and in essence, it was that she became a very, very independent person. I obviously shifted my whole persona.
Mm-hmm.
And then coming back together, it was like starting a whole new relationship. And unfortunately for us, the gap was too much to bridge, and that cost me. I was on a mission, and I was very, very focused on achieving my fullest potential. And she wasn't supportive of that journey anymore, and I'd put her through a lot, and she'd stuck.
Sure.
And I got to give her, I'll never speak a bad word about her. She brought my kids to see me every single weekend without fail. She facilitated my relationship with my kids. And I have an enormous amount of respect for what she was able to achieve in not just the time that we were pre-prison and the journey that we took together through, the club and through all the things that we went through, the shooting and everything. She was there. She was one staunch soldier. And on the flip side of that, she'd had enough, and the business failure was just one of those things that she didn't support me into at the start. She actually said, "Don't do it." I went and did it anyway. It was just a part of my journey, and she wanted out, and probably rightly so. She'd been through enough, So, but yeah, I was lucky enough to have her for that period, to be able to have access to my kids, and we maintained a certain standard of living even though I was away. Luckily enough, through our support and through what we've been able to hold on to. So. Yeah, I consider myself very lucky to have had her in my life for that period of time.
Fantastic. She does sound like she was a rock in those really tough times for you, man. Like that's great. So God bless her. We have a question come through from the UK from Mr. Boom Bastic. He says, can you ask, and he said this might have been addressed previously. I haven't read this yet though. So my mother is a very prayerful woman and has always chosen forgiveness, even when I've done terrible things. Do you think, given your experience, one can ever live a fulfilled life without being able to forgive and having been forgiven?
Okay. No. The short answer is no. I don't believe, and I don't judge anybody at all. I'm a free spirit. I'm a spiritual man. I believe in one love, one free love, one. God is not this man sitting up there. He's an energy, right? I do believe that. The background to saying no is the fact that I believe in my own experience and what I've learned and what I've built and my knowledge and my wisdom is that if you can't let go, and there's an entity that lives in you, there's an energy that lives in you that is not free from judgment or condemnation of one person or an act, it will impact your ability to be free and to operate from a place of love. So yes, even if it's a minor impact on your life, I absolutely believe that it's a key to being free and complete is forgiving, is that energy of forgiveness. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we've got, I think we've got a couple more messages here. Let me just check. Joey Butts, thank you for understanding and answering it, because this was the question he asked before, because I don't ever say things right the first time. I'm quick to forgive and believe it's imperative in life, although I haven't experienced too much tragedy or things like you're speaking about. However, I totally admire this. He said, I totally admire this. I think if anything, it's just good to aspire to forgive. That's from Joey Butts. Okay. We've got one from Elvis the King. Drew, your story is awesome and inspirational. I've followed you on this app and definitely want to hear more from you. Cheers to both of you and Rock. Great show. So thank you very much, King, for that. We appreciate that. Anyone wants to leave any voicemails, you're free to do so. We will be bringing people up on stage to say a quick hello, ask Drew questions sort of towards the end of the podcast, which we're starting to taper off towards now. So there's still more to go, though. So you're in this life of positivity now, man. Like, it's a full swing around too. It's not just like you're not doing criminal activities anymore. You're like aspiring to being the best fucking human you can be. You're helping people with lives with coaching. What are some of the things you really got into? Obviously, you're doing podcasting, which we want to give a plug. You've written a couple of books that you're going to be in. You've co-created as well just recently. The coaching. Tell us all how this is all swept along to this point.
Yeah, so I went back to study. I studied coaching, transformational coaching and success coaching. I started to get some coaching clients and obviously generate some momentum. I studied hypnotherapy, tantra, really, really beautiful study of the universe that we've got inside, right? We call it the U-inverse, our own universe, and how to get meaning in every daily activity and connect more deeply and openly to yourself in order to be able to connect and, be open to other people. I studied Christianity. I studied Buddhism. So that's the spiritual entity. I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. I'm a free love guy. I don't judge anybody's religion or anybody's belief. There was that step into coaching. And during my prison days, I'd also written, this is holistic here. This is big. This is big dreams here, and I'll wind this up shortly. But I'd written a movie concept called The Perfect World, and I'm actually working with a prominent Melbourne producer to deliver a short film, which we're going to be taking to film festivals. And it's interesting because it's prophetic, because I wrote it in prison, and here it is playing out. In our daily world, right? And never more significant, because the perfect world is about how our beautiful but broken world becomes healed of itself, right? By using another world that's 5,000 years ahead of us, but has progressed through our journey. So that's another little story. So I'm working with a prominent Melbourne producer. I was on that from day one that I got out, that I got released. Then obviously, connecting to the coaching journey and then drawing on the journey of what I call it's repentance, which is being sorry for your actions. It's restitution and reconciliation. So restitution is identifying the broken piece of yourself, and then reconciliation is putting those broken pieces of yourself back together and then giving that back. So I'm writing a book at the moment called How to Find Hope and Heal Yourself, as well as the coaching and the mentoring that I'm doing. I've studied relationships coaching and mentoring. I got invited to participate as a co-author in 2 books that you've touched on. They're going to be global releases. They're anthologies, which have been Amazon bestsellers. They're going to be released this month. I've got the Man to Man Let's Talk About It podcast series, which has got a men's mental health flavour. I'm passionate about that, obviously having lived through my own traumas and transcended those and healed. I've had some really great interviews and obviously interacting with other podcasts as well, which is I'm committed to doing. So if anybody's out there who wants to attack a particular topic that I've talked about or that I'm familiar with, I love that. and also interact on my podcast, because obviously giving back to the lives of men and sharing this healing journey and exactly what you're capable of with the right mindset and the right approach, which is healing from your childhood right the way through, no Band-Aids. This is sustainable change that I'm able to achieve with my clients, and something I'm very passionate about, and it's my passion and purpose. But so again, there's the books, there's the podcast release, there's the movie in the background. I'm actually the executive director of 2 different companies. We're raising in the order of $500 million. One's a mining company and one's a waste to energy company. So that's my entrepreneurial pursuits as well. I'm the head of global business development for those two companies, and an investor in those companies as well. So yeah, ever since I've been out now 4 or 5 years, and my journey just continues to build momentum. I have a vision to impact the lives of 5 million people over the next 5 years in a positive manner. I've got a TED talk lined up, which is going to be my love letter to the world, and how the world should start to manage itself in order to progress away from these, the structure of how governments are leading us to war, and spending billions of dollars on military hardware instead of on our own hope and healing. So I'm just going to be lending my voice to the world. I'm working with a videographer in doing some TikTok reels. I do some short videos where I share some of the healing and some of the messages that I've got, and lending my voice to the world. So again, my journey is I dream big. I dream big, and I take action on those dreams every single day. And that's my commitment. My commitment is that my success can bring more hope and more healing. It's not about financial gain. It's about what that money can do for this world, and the hope and the healing that I can bring. So that's what I'm passionate about. And
man, you can see it, you can feel it. And here's the thing: I know you don't swear anymore, but fucking oath, man, this is great that we are, that to hear what you're doing, right? And I can really see that it's come from a place like this. Is that you were so hurt, so lost, so looking for someone to have loved you from back then, that you figured out that formula, and it's impacted your life so strongly that you must get others to go through that path, to understand and to be free like you are. And it's the message is apparent, man. Congratulations. I'm going to turn the sound effects back on now, because I muted them for the show because they were cutting you off a little bit. So sound effects are back. Give it a click. That's it. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Clap it up. All right, there we go. Man, so inspirational, man. I'm so glad to have met you. We only met last week, but I'm sure that our journey together, just meeting each other and speaking, is going to be like when I met Ray as well, continuing from this point forth, which is exciting for me to get to know you, my brother. Okay.
Like you and all you guys, my voice means nothing if I have no ears for it to fall on. So very humbled by the invite, and congratulations on the success that you're having with the podcast, and to all your crew and all your listeners. We need you guys. You're an important part of our journey and bringing our voice to the world. So I'm always very humbled by getting the opportunity to speak to people and to share my journey and share my story in such an authentic way, and to stand in that authenticity. People might judge me or try and hold me to that old identity, and you know what? That's only the mirror of their own judgment. If I trigger something in them, it's the judgment that they have of themselves. Right? They're not free yet, and I don't judge that. Right? No one gets to hold me to that old identity. I'm free. I'm free to love, and I'm free to share that. So again, completely humbled.
You should be keeping your name then, Free Girl, but maybe that was a sign, man. Who knows,
Definitely. I'm not going to.
Absolutely. So we've got a message from Skinny. Here we go.
I want to say real quickly, Free, I appreciate you, and I love your passion. I love your story. It's just phenomenal. And the Rock's right. I would absolutely, positively love to have you in the hot seat at some point. Maybe we can make that happen. I hope so. Reach out to me on Instagram if you can. And stay blessed, man. And Rock, brother, another home run. You're unbelievable, brother. But anyway, you guys have a great one.
Thank you, Skinny. And just to say straight off the bat, if anyone wants me to connect Drew with them for any podcast, absolutely. Let me know. I'll connect you with him. You wouldn't believe it hearing him, but he's kind of fresh in the podcast world. But listen to him go. He's absolutely professional how he speaks already. It's like you've been doing it for 5 years already, mate. So well done to you for that. We're going to start bringing people up on stage soon. If you want to get involved, just hold that thought for a second. I do want to ask you a couple more questions before we do. So going back as a child, back to those times, back to that same that man that you saw try to hang himself at your house when you were 11 years old, the one that was with your mother. If you could have had three particular traits to help you through at that young age, what would they have been for you?
3 traits that would have helped me at that age would have been, you mean as me, as an individual, as a young kid?
If you could pull 3 things that would have helped you through to have saved you going down a particular track, what would they have been?
It definitely would have been a human connection, and I would say a father figure role model that could have walked me through and sheltered me and helped me to understand the outcome of witnessing something like that, the trauma, to help me walk me through that. That would have been, I believe, I really know that living without a father figure role model or that positive role model in my life had a massive impact. So that's one. To be able to decode the emotions that were post-trauma, because it was just buried. It was just like I didn't have an issue, right? The issue was everybody else's. They just gave me a reason to project my anger or to project my vengeance upon them, and I blamed everybody else. I didn't take ownership out of that over that. So again, it's a father figure role model, the ability to deal with the emotions that I was struggling with, and 3 probably would be maybe around finding something to connect me with the outer world that didn't make me feel different, and I'm not sure what that means. Maybe the connection with kids of my age or something to facilitate my connection, because I always felt so different, and I still do now, right? I know that I'm walking a very isolated journey, but for me back then, I just felt I felt disconnected. So maybe something around connecting with people.
Okay, interesting that. Thank you. So, last question before we ask anyone if they want to pop up is, if you as an adult now could go back and speak to 2 people, being one your father and one that other guy that was with your mother, if they were young and you were giving them advice, what would you say to each of them?
Interestingly, first of all, the guy that I actually saved his life has been to one of my men's retreats, and I looked in his eyes and I've forgiven him. Okay, so that's one component. What would I say to him as a young man? I would say find someone to help you deal with the traumas that you've been, because you're about to live a life of brokenness and substance abuse to be able to handle what you've gone through, your own brokenness. So I'd advise him to seek a mentor or to seek some help in regards to dealing with his emotions. If I could speak to my dad when he was young, I would say to him, keep your kids as close as you possibly can, because they're going to need you.
Beautiful. Man, I want to thank you for your time here today so much. We're going to start to wrap out the podcast. I want to know if anyone wants to pop up and ask Drew any questions firsthand, or just even thank him. Pop up on stage for a minute or 2. You don't have to have camera. You can if you want. Just interact with us. So anyone want to pop up for a minute or 2? Feel free to do so. We've got Deanna coming up right now. Hi, Deanna. How are you?
Open
I'm
heart.
good. How are you?
Good. Thank you very much.
I have so many things to say and ask,
Sure.
because he is just right in my alley. So
Absolutely. That's
I'm
why
not
I
gonna go
had you in mind when
know.
we're doing this podcast.
All
Yeah.
right. And I did reach out to you on Instagram. I don't know how much
Okay.
activity you have on Instagram, so just look.
A
But
lot,
what I
but thank you.
okay. Well, no, I'm saying, Drew, I know you have tons, Rock.
Oh,
But
okay.
I found him on there somehow. I don't even
Sure,
know
sure,
how
sure. He's
roundabout.
connected through my Instagram too. I always post my guests and connect their social media. So if you want to connect direct with Drew, please go there. You can find him on one of my posts through Twitter or Instagram or Facebook.
Perfect.
Go ahead,
But one
Tatiana.
of the things that I wanted to say, when you were talking, there's 2 points. Number one, from the childhood aspect and saying, like, what do you need as a child to carry you through this? And I think that's something that we need to look back at so that parents who have gone through this, like, there are things maybe your mom could have done um, to support you through a situation. I think that I learned a lot from the one you did, Rock, with the God, I can't remember his name right now. Plush Jody.
Jody Plichet. Yep.
Yeah, because his mom, like, he talked about that, like how she handled that situation made a
Yep.
difference in how he was able to move through the trauma. And
Sure.
so I think that's a key thing, and I would love to get more thoughts from you on that. But also your topic of forgiveness, and in the forgiveness when you were talking about it, I was thinking about, like, right, it's not absolution, it's not justification. We don't condone the actions of someone else, but also the part where is it really necessary? And you kind of touched on this to even talk to the person that you are forgiving. And on the flip side, when you've done things that you need forgiveness for, are you giving away any of your power when you ask for forgiveness, or is the prime forgiveness self forgiveness? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a pretty loaded question, man, with everything right. But yeah, let's go for that. It's great question. Thanks, Diana.
Yeah, thanks heaps, Dan. I look forward to connecting with you on Insta. I did a post in regards to my Tantra practices and how we connect in love with a divine partner. And I was actually kicked off Facebook and Insta. I had about 35,000 on Insta and nearly 5,000 on Facebook. So I had a full book. So I'm rebuilding that, but I'm definitely there. So look forward to connecting with you and speaking on whatever medium you choose to. So first of all, in regards to the parents thing, I think my mum did an incredible job. She always wore her heart on her sleeve. She had a number of animals, for example. She always had an open heart to friends and stray animals. That was in her nature. She did the best of what she could, coming off the back of her own trauma for her own childhood. So I certainly don't blame my mum. If anything, it's probably dad's influence or lack of influence. But again, I let go of that too. The fact that he did the best he could. He didn't have us every week. So, I certainly see its impact upon me. Yes, I do. But separating my energy as an adult, being able to take full ownership of my actions, I separated the blame of how I was brought up to the fact is I was a young man and I had the capacity and capability to make my own decisions. So again, it was 100% ownership over my actions, separating that it was time for me to step up. I could no longer justify my actions off the back of being the product of my broken past. I was actually realizing it that allowed me to transcend that. In terms of forgiveness, this is a very, very deep subject, something I'm very passionate about, and we could do a whole podcast on just that, because the fact is if we look at the subatomic particle level, we are all made up of the same thing, electrons and protons cycling very, very quickly, which give off an energy, and we can measure that energy. It's proven. Spirituality and science is now converging in a way that would blow your mind, and some of the research that I've done. When we talk about energy and healing energy, it's a catalyst, right? All we're doing is severing the energy. And I didn't go into it too much, but again, we could do a whole podcast on it. It's severing the energy. If we want to move into a complete love and forgiveness energy, we can't do that whilst living in judgment and condemnation and blame and all these other tangled up negative energies, right? If energy wants to be free and we want to progress into a very pure energy, the forgiveness part of that is a catalyst to being a free energy. Free to evolve, free to not be held back in that energy. And I know it's tough for some people to understand. And again, this I'll take it a whole other podcast to understand how energy works. And the fact is that when we look at it on a scale, we can measure when a person is sick compared to when a person is in very, very high happy state. We can measure their frequency. And if you live in guilt, shame, judgment, condemnation, all these other things, you're vibrating on a very low frequency. right? That begins to manifest as dis-ease, disease. What is disease? Dis-ease. We're in a state of dis-ease. These are lower frequencies that makes people sick. When we elevate into forgiveness, healing, truth, love, enlightenment, all these higher energies, right? We start to shift our frequency. We start to heal quicker. We start to be more positive. We start to let go of the past. We start to welcome in truth, right? And that's the essence of forgiveness, right? It's tangled up in all this positive energy, right? And we don't want to be held down anymore. We want to progress through that. We want to be operating on these higher realms, and we can't do that if we don't forgive ourselves. And forgiving ourselves is huge. You even have to forgive yourself. I need to forgive myself for seeing what I saw when I was young. It wasn't my fault. I needed to heal from that. I need to forgive myself. I hold that space for myself. So not just forgiving the other person, and we don't need to do that in person. We just acknowledge that I'm moving through that. I let go of that. I'm forgiving me for all the mistakes I made. I'm not justifying what I did. I'm not glorifying what I did. It was wrong. I own it. But to move past it, to stop being the product of it, this is the catalyst of healing.
Right, I agree a lot. My 5 keys that I move through, forgiveness is the first one, because if you can't get through that, everything else is kind of blocked. And I'm with you on the energy thing. I love that, because I've done cord release. I've done these things where, so that you can unhook yourself and disentangle yourself from all of these hooks that you have, like, in your soul. Really, that's what it is, energetically.
Yes.
So I know we're speaking the same language, but to move through the forgiveness, when I first started doing that, was really, like, for me, it was profound, because I didn't know what the definition of forgiveness was. I didn't really know what forgiveness was, and I thought it was outward. And then when I turned it inward is when I realized that now I'm free. Now I'm free. I have all this emotional space that's there now that was held up with, like you said, blame and guilt and shame and all of these things. And yes, there were things that I did wrong, and there were things that were, done to me. But at the end of the day, all of it has to be removed. And for me, that helped me to move into gratitude for all of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And then when I was able to do that, that's where the elevation really comes. Gratitude and love, what is that? That's like the highest frequency ever. And if you can get into that frequency or that vibration, like you speak of, then you can move through all of those things. And then I have a couple other keys. I'm not going to get into all of that, but but they all are a journey to self-love, right? And I think that's where people as a collective right now are starting to recognize we need to do something about the way we approach things, or we're going to keep cycling through what we've been in. And that's, I think this great pause, quote unquote, has made us just realize that more now than ever, that we don't want to go back to whatever normal was, So, yeah,
Look,
I
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Your story is incredible. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for
Thank you,
bringing
Diana.
him on,
Thank you
Rock.
for hopping up. Appreciate that.
Mhm.
I'll just move you down as Joey Butts has come up to the. Sorry, do that. As Joey Butts has come up to the listeners. But before we kick off on Joey's question, I have one from Mr. Bombastic from the UK. How mentally draining has the journey to the person you are now been, considering the stigma your history inevitably becomes with? And what would you say to young people that you see down that bad path? Also, can you come to London so I can give you a hug? He's a 6'11" big fucking giant, by the way. So yeah.
as long as he gives me a leg up to give him a hug. Look, I love all the love that's being shared. Open heart, it's human connection is the essence of what it is to live this human journey. So a lot of gratitude. Thanks, Diana. I think it was for your questions and for stepping into that space. I was just starting to feel you, by the way, because feeling is a huge thing. So where was I? In terms of the last question that was asked, is how much energy is being drained from me? Let me first of all say that I connected to the beauty and the divinity of my own energy, right? So when we do that, we become connected with the divine energy source, right? The source is, it doesn't matter how you want to define God or you want to define the ether. which is we don't even know, right? And this is, again, another whole podcast. We don't even know what's powering the electron and the proton at the speeds. It's mind-boggling, right? So we don't know. We know nothing about what we're a part of and just the grand nature of this, right? So in terms of energy, no energy was taken from me. It was taking energy when I was operating on those lower levels, when I was projecting, when I was anger, when I was living in anger, when I was guilt, shame, all those other things. That was bleeding my energy away. When I stepped into forgiveness, I stepped into power, I stepped into love, gratitude, all these high vibrational things, and started to live that, I actually found my energy was increasing. And when I connected to the source, the energy source, and my own divinity, and realized that I'm not separate from nature, that I'm a part of nature, I've got an infinite source of energy that I can draw upon at all points in time. I've reclaimed my energy, right? I'm a pure energetic being, being that healed energy, living in a place of love and gratitude. So yeah, brother, it's a beautiful place for any human being to live, mate.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the question there, Mr. Bombastic. Joey Butts,
Hey,
you're up, brother.
what's happening? What's going
How
on,
are you,
guys?
man?
Hey, what's up, Rocky? Pretty nice to meet you and talk to you personally, man. I know, like, when I say I don't articulate well, I literally can sound like, what are you talking about? When I ask questions or say things in messages, but I appreciate you having me up here. Like, when you say calling, I'm glad you mentioned that this is a calling for you. I don't think people say that enough with things that like this, or whatever you want to call it, like priests, pastors. That's a calling. People mistake it for a job a lot of times, I think. You know what I mean? They don't say it enough. Calling is like, this is something more than a job. It's something more than you know what I mean? I appreciate that you mentioned that a little while back, because that's needs to be. You don't do these things because it's getting you anything beneficial, other than you trying to help someone or what have you. And I love that. Forgiveness, though, has always been a huge thing in the last probably like 10 years of my life. We've all hated something or someone in our lives when I was young, but you realize, like, that takes a lot of energy and time out of your life, like, really, it does. I can't really remember the last thing or person that I had that kind of feeling for, but, like, man, you gave them too much, too. Depending on what it was, you gave them too much of you hating them. You know what I mean? Like, it really does. Me and my brother, some people think that I'm crazy for forgiving my brother. Me and him, we got into knockdown dragouts up until like 5 years ago, kind of. I'm 38, he's like 44. And like, he hit me with something and like left some bruises on my back. I've never been the type to like get like personally hurt if somebody got the better of me in a fight ever. Maybe it's because I'm the youngest of three brothers, but I was like, all he did was say sorry, and I was like, it's all right, man. Okay, was more or less sad that you were mad at me. That's how mad, I'm glad you're not mad at me anymore. And forgiveness. Somebody told me, like, that's a really good quality or virtue or something like that. And I'm like, well, I just thought of it as I don't want anybody to be mad at me. You know what I mean? Like, I just like to forgive the people that I love first and foremost, and like also try to forgive the things that, well, okay, I forgive you, man, because I can't really give you any more than just saying, let's just forget it. Kind of let bygones be bygones, or let's go our own way. Because anything more, you're giving too much of. I just glad that I've had that awareness about me. I'm sorry to keep rambling, but it's important, man. It really is. It's important. And my friends were like, dude, F him. I can't believe you're even talking to him. I'm like, it's my brother, man. First of all. Second of all, you guys they're like kind of insecure dudes anyway. Like you get mad because somebody got the better of you in a fight. Well, I feel bad for you because that sucks. That's happened to me a lot. But either way, I just feel like, if you can forgive somebody for something, like, it's way better off. Way, way better off. But here comes my boss to come talk to me about this spill that I have in my truck. And I
Tell him you love him, Joey.
Yeah, I will. I'm gonna tell him. And I forgive you for giving me this crap truck, dude. Anyway, but thank you guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Joey. Thanks, brother. Love you too, man. All the best. I'll bring you back down to the listeners. Thanks, Joey. Okay. So yeah, so if anyone else wants to pop up, as we're just starting to wrap this up now, let us know. But before we do, I see Dave in the crowd there. Now, there's another show that you got to get on, man. It's called How Was Your Day? It's on once a week here on Fireside. It's always our Thursday morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, but it's in the US every Wednesday evening. And there is Sam and Dave. They'll have a guest up there. They talk a couple of funny like newsreels that happen for the week, and then they have a guest that they sort of skim through an interview with, and they touch on things. So if you want to be a guest on their show, I can try and organize that for you as well. They run a great show, really great show, and you have a laugh. You have a laugh all the way through too. You know, it's a funny show too. But Drew, man, I just want to thank you for your time tonight, our evening, which is it's daytime in the US, for this awesome story. I'm looking forward to your podcast coming out. Can you tell us a bit more about the podcast and where we can find you on social media?
Yes, so definitely connect with me through Facebook at Drew Geldert or Insta Drew Geldert. Launching my website is pretty exciting because it's a pretty big website. That's to be released. The podcast will be on all major podcast outlets, but there'll be date releases and series releases and media releases. The books are coming out. They're on Amazon. They'll be a global release as well. So yeah, follow me for updates on my Insta or Facebook. The podcast is, again, just touching on the fact that I'm really passionate about men's health, and the fact is if we are a complete version and a healed version of ourselves, we can be the best fathers, the best husbands, the best partners, the best people that we can possibly be. And the whole men's persona and this whole divine masculinity is being watered down by all these mistruths and misconceptions about what it is to be a man in 2022, right? So it's breaking down a lot of that stigma. The podcast is about, getting to the essence of the truth by using other people's journeys and stories and going to places and extracting, key success factors out of other people's and successful people's lives and unsuccessful people's lives too, by the way. And really giving that essence back. And that's all off the back of my own healing journey and just understanding that, again, as men, we need this knowledge. We need this wisdom. We need to learn that it's okay to want to change, to let go and to progress towards, to have this unwavering drive towards the best version of ourselves and be okay with that. So yeah, it's a big part of my journey, man.
Man, what a beautiful journey it's turning out to be. Really, again, I'm thankful to have met you, man, and I'm going to watch this journey unfold and hopefully be part of it along the way too when we're doing these sort of shows. I believe you want us to be a guest on your show, which is amazing for me, and I'll be more than happy to do that, and I'm excited to watch Man to Man launch. So thank you again. I'll give ourselves just another plug here on the Rocstedi podcast. So if you want to obviously tune into these shows, if you're listening on one of the simulcast streams, come over to Fireside. That's where the action's at. You can interact with the audience live by hearing the claps and the laughs and things with the emojis in the background. You can hop up on stage with us as well, or you can also interact by leaving a voice message with us in future through my Instagram at _Rocstedi. You can find me on Twitter at _Rocstedi, or everywhere else, being Facebook, YouTube, Discord, Telegram, all that under the Rocstedi podcast. Or just Google the Rocstedi podcast, you'll find it.
Sorry to interrupt your plug. Hopefully you got that all out then. But I've just been made a creator on Firestar. On this is Firestar, isn't it?
Fireside, yeah. You've been made a creator.
Been made a creator, so I'm going to be bringing the man.
Awesome. Well done, man. That's great. Fellow Firesider here. We've got a few in the crowd. So did you get that email today?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, yep. Wonderful, man.
So look forward to interacting with you all and yeah, follow me here and I'll follow you back and let's take this journey.
Absolutely, man. If you want any tips, tricks and keys on Fireside, how to get going, let me know. I'm your man. And there's also a couple of people that are in the process of getting accepted yet and that can do some hot shows for you. So maybe you might want to have them on your channel to still do the interviews with you, but it's just like a different spin on your channel. But I can talk to you about all that offline. Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time, man. We're going to be touching almost on 3 hours, so the timing's perfect, really, from what we discussed before. And loving the live interaction. I'm going to give who's left in the audience just a quick shout out here that I can see. We've got Angel, we've got Robert, Truthful Sweet, We've got Charlie. Thanks for joining. Zoe, Uncle Eddie, Southern Hubs, Jeff, Ant, Elvis, AC, Shani, Dave, E, Joey, Deanna, Mr. Bombastic, and Will. So thank you for hanging in the show here. And if you're listening on one of the simulcast streams on Android, thank you for listening in. In future, leave us a message so we know you're there as well. Appreciate you all. Appreciate Fireside, and appreciate you, Drew, for coming on and telling this story, man, and opening up so much to us. It's such a great story, man.
Love, light, peace, happiness, and respect to everyone. Yourself, thanks for having me on. Thanks to the crowd. Thanks for all the questions. Thanks for the interaction. Blessings and peace. Thank
you very much, man. All right, we're going to end out the show. I'll bring up Waitbot here, and I'll pop us down to the listeners. Thank you. Okay.